Am I
Yep,
amazing?
you got it.
Hey,
Ooh, that was a
Go ahead.
stressful
nice.
2 minutes, 5 minutes.
I'm sure people understand.
Oh, yeah.
I hope they do.
Fashionably late.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're
Uh,
anglers. Come on, not IT.
yeah. Am I
Yep.
amazing? You got it.
Hey.
Nice.
All right.
Oh,
We are up and running. Welcome, everyone.
fantastic.
Cool. So, yeah, this is going to be really fun. Yeah, still waiting for people to trickle in. Hopefully, we didn't lose too many with that technical difficulty there. But, yeah, how are you guys keeping? You just
Good.
tying away or what?
Yeah,
Yeah, that
time.
time of year. Tie in time, for sure.
Yeah, cool.
Lots
Oh,
of tying, squeaking in a little bit of fishing.
one more settings change, I think, here.
Oh,
I think. Oh, no.
Working?
Are we good? Just right screen.
it says live on my end.
It
What?
does. It says that it might be private. That doesn't make sense. Just try it link. Make sure it didn't like change it to a new link here.
Mm.
Okay, yeah, we got 5 folks watching, so I think we're good.
All right.
No one can hear us out on the other webs. Let us know that you can read us all right.
I think you're gonna have to monitor the chat because I don't
Yeah,
see
I'm
anything on
trying to
this
just
end.
pull it up right now here.
All I have is our Zoom chat.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was like like last week it was so warm the river near my house was wide open, so I went and swum a bunch of pike flies in there, gave a bunch of new patterns a shot, see how they work. Kind of hard to believe middle of February and you're casting.
It's
I had no
wild.
fish. Yeah. I'm surprised I honestly didn't catch one. Like I probably should have.
Ah, it's been sunny enough. They'd probably go up
Yeah.
somewhere.
I took a water temp and it was like just it was upper 30s already.
Really?
Really?
Like oh that's crazy. It
Happens
was like
right
30, 38 in the one river. So yeah,
there.
not far. It's yeah, prime time spawning like right now in February.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what. Yeah, I was about to say, like, they're gonna start spawning real soon if that's the case.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It'll
Huh.
be an interesting year.
Yeah, definitely. That's gonna be real interesting. Yeah, anyone watching as a steelheader definitely get out sooner
Mhm.
rather than later. Otherwise, might be missing out on a bit of fishing or
I
this fish
think
dropping
on,
out.
yeah, honestly, March this year is going to be what April or May usually is.
Mm-hmm.
Like also with
Yeah,
the
sorry,
trout
Chris. It
opener,
looks like the link changed. So hopefully everyone can find their way over. But I'm not sure why that happened. But we
can
seem to
you
be all
maybe
right.
like
People seem to be finding us. So give it a
maybe
sec.
share it on maybe
I'm
share it on
gonna do it just
Instagram?
on social right now, just to
Yeah,
react that.
and then we'll give people some time.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just
Happy to be doing this new version of streaming here, where we don't have to send out Zoom links and all that. It's nice, but
Hmm.
a little bit of a learning curve.
Definitely, totally.
Yeah,
But yeah, the fish are in thick right now, so I imagine it's going to be interesting come opener. See what happens. Also with openers late this year, kind of right, like the way it works.
yeah.
we
It's
miss we're
as late
we're
as it
missing
could be.
almost a week. Yeah, we're like missing a week almost of fishing.
Yeah.
Um, so that'll also be interesting for the steelhead run. Pray for lots of snow.
yeah, almost all gone where
Also,
I am.
I
We had
know,
no snow, then we had a foot of snow,
yeah,
and we're almost down to no snow again. So
really, that's like us. Yeah, we had tons, and it was nothing. I was joking about cutting my grass with my wife. Like for a
You're
week, we
getting
had no
there.
snow. Yeah,
yeah,
it was going green again. It was no longer brown. And then this week we got like 50 some odd centimeters. Like we got crushed. So we're still plenty up here.
Yeah, that's good. Still a bit in the bush.
Oh my God, front lawn, bush,
Yeah,
everything's
good.
there's lots of snow up in Midland, but that's not where our trout streams are.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding.
I don't know what the said like Southern Ontario closer to the credits like, but I
I
imagine
mean,
it's
it's fishing really well, but
well
I mean,
like
as far as
I mean
water
like
levels go,
That's what I
I
mean.
think up
Yeah.
Paladin Way, there's still a bit of snow on the ground. Like I'm up in Aurora,
Yeah.
which is not crazy far up, but like, in line with sort of
Yep.
headwaters of a bunch of rivers, and it's pretty dry out there.
Wow.
There's snow, but looking out, like see the yard right now, like there's not much.
Crazy.
So yeah, we'll see. I'm hoping for maybe another dumping or at least a wet spring, but I mean, it's gonna make for
All
some really good pre-opener fishing.
Oh, totally. And all the better for the full year pike fishery in the Kawarthas.
Yeah,
You know,
100%.
the spawn will be over soon, and we'll
Well,
be
and
back
like
to
I know you and I, Matt, are going to check out some of that kind of
yeah.
pre-spawn bass season on Lake
Oh,
Ontario.
exactly.
They're going to be a little further along than most years, right? So
They could be they could be right up there in the shallows, like building nests and stuff. Which
exactly.
obviously you're going to want to avoid, but it might make for some even tricky
But
fishing.
you'll have some fish at least that are just
In
off those areas
yeah,
versus like the super pre-spawn fish that are in like 20 feet of water. At least you'll
exactly.
have the option to hit some in like 10 feet, 15.
Yeah,
So
or shallower. Yeah.
exactly, right? So I think that's going to be really cool. I'm really excited to do more of
Yeah,
that
and I
this
hope I was talking to a friend of mine. I mean, I don't know how true this is, but who works with the MNR and actually works with the regulations and talking about
year.
how this is a pretty serious trial for a lot of different areas in Ontario.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
like delaying the actual opener to like early July, but
yeah.
creating a pre-spawn season, especially on other Great Lakes.
Hmm.
There's a cool I was actually forwarded it to an article or some research from Queen's University on their bass studies. It's
Yeah,
pretty impressive how much work they've put into it, specifically on the St. Lawrence and Eastern Lake Ontario.
yeah.
Yeah, it's cool to see bass research. To be honest, you don't actually see
Hmm.
too much of that.
Yeah, or at least it's not in our circles always publicized.
Exactly.
But,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
cool. Just getting one other thing up there, just to try and help people find us here.
Sure.
But
Okay.
we get going in a sec here. So when do you guys each kind of consider your kickoff to pike season? And we're all fishing different areas. All about.
I have to earliest I can get's kind of May 1st in my main areas when it opens, or the Kawarthas if it's open all year. But
I think my guiding season, I mean, the region I'm in would open May 25th or something like that, but we don't get guests until June 10th.
Yeah,
That's
right.
because ice. I mean, I'm so far north. I mean, there's still ice.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So maybe we should open talking a little bit about that and just introducing ourselves. So we've
totally.
done streams with all of us before, but Andrew, why don't you kick it off?
Yeah. My name's Andrew Marr. I've been a pike fishing guide for over a decade now. I work out in Saskatchewan for Wollaston Lake Lodge. Yeah, and so I've done some videos and I've done work with you guys on here, and yeah, I just fly fishing pike, sort of my jam.
Wicked. And you, Matt, you're a little more local.
Awesome. Yeah, everyone probably I've seen me with you guys before. My name is Matt Martin with Smooth River Guiding. A guide service here in Central Ontario that operates kind of all over from Southern Ontario on Lake Ontario to up in the Muskokas. Predominantly spending a lot of the trips for pike specifically. I'm thinking more the Georgian Bay, Kawartha, Muskoka region. Yeah, I'm a multi-species guide for sure, as you have to be in Southern Ontario. You have to take advantage of all the different fisheries we have. But pike is definitely up there in my favorite species to guide for. Probably equally tied there with bass in some sort, mostly because of the visual aspect of fishing. I'm not going to lie, I love, steelhead and trout just the same, but there's something about watching somebody, their legs start shaking when they see their first true monster pike or that boat side strike, even if it's only a 32 incher. And I say only a 32 incher. That's a big fish for most fish out there. But that's kind of where we start. That would be what we almost call, a hammer handle, or maybe slightly bigger than a hammer handle. They're incredibly fun and take big flies. And there's lots of them, lots of lakes to fish. There's lots of room to spread out compared to some of our trout rivers.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. And then myself, I'm maybe not, I don't think I've put quite as many days on the water in my life for pike sea guys, but, down in Toronto area. So fishing bit of overlap with that for sure, like Muskoka's territory and Kawarthas too. then also, a bit down Lake Ontario and stuff. So some unique aspects of that fishery, just in terms of the bait down there and water clarity and stuff. I feel like in pressure as well. So really interesting area in its own right. So that's awesome. So tonight's format, we'll go for like an hour and a half or so here, however long it takes. We've got a bunch of questions for each other because we all like to pick each other's brains as much as anyone's on how we fish, because we're all a little different. So we're going to chat a little ourselves, but we're also going to field Q&A from you guys. So any questions, doesn't matter really how basic, how advanced you want to get with things. We'll probably not go on like huge gear rants, though I think we're going to touch a little on some gear and basic stuff. But yeah, anything you want, just drop it in the comments. We're going to be watching those and hopefully have fun. I've been looking forward to it all week, so this is going to be good.
Yeah, tons of fun.
Sweet. Yeah, you're right on it, Matt, pulling up the Q&A list there. But
yeah, I forgot my questions.
Yeah, you wrote them down in the text chat. Yeah.
You can open that email real quick.
Yeah, exactly.
I could just go ad lib, but
Yeah, well, I guess one for you guys that I would ask is like, and again, like we're fishing different fisheries for sometimes slightly different size fish. Like we have small fish with big fish down here, but like Matt, if you're guiding, there's some numbers fisheries, as you know, there's some big fish fisheries. Andrew only catches big fish because I apply to him. But like in terms of ideal kind of rods, I think would be a good place to start for folks, because you hear a lot, I think, about different varying opinions on this stuff. Like, what do you consider minimum, maximum, sweet spot? What are your thoughts on that?
In my boat, I think most anglers would probably carry a 9-weight and a 10-weight. I've on the downside, I have the odd person that has an 8. Maybe if somebody that has a bad shoulder or they just can't handle that. But I mean, in an 8-weight will handle some big fish. If you're not in a lot of structure, like if you have sort of open water, you can fight that fish and not worry about getting into weeds or trees and things like that. But yeah, 9-10 weight, but we're not throwing giant flies, so we don't really get into like the musky size sort of 10-12 weights or anything like that. But yeah, I think that 9-10 weight's it's a good spot.
Anything you look for in a rod specifically, or you're pretty happy with most rods in there?
Yeah, most rods. Yeah, I don't know that I go out of my way. I mean, I want something with some backbone. I don't want something super soft. I want something with a bit of oomph to it when you need it.
What about you, Matt?
Yeah, I'd have to agree. My favorite is a 10-weight all around. I feel like it's you're never going to be outgunned on a fish, but it's still fun enough catching smaller fish. We do throw some bigger flies in some of the lakes I fish, just due to the size of some of the forage, and it's nothing to throw like 9-10 inch flies for these fish. So having a 10 gives you a little bit more power. But I'll be the first to say every pike can be caught on an 8-weight. I haven't had one that would, you'd be completely outgunned with proper fighting techniques. And I think one of the big things with any rod is learning how to pull on a fish instead of lifting with your rod. So I think this came back to, some of the experiences I've had in saltwater and like tarpon fishing, where we're throwing like 10 weights for like 100-pound fish. Like those rods are completely outnumbered for like a 15-pound pike then, so learning how to pull, which is more of like stripping and pulling back with your rod versus lifting with the rod tip, utilizing the backbone on your rod and really loading it right to the cork, helps keep big fish under control. And then I think a 10-weight will help punch those bigger flies, but it's still delicate enough to throw a 6-inch bunny leech. It's not overkill. So yeah, I think if I had to pick one, it would be a 10 for sure. Personally,
I would agree. Like, so the lodge I'm at, we supply a fly rod in every boat, and they're all 10 weights. And you're right. Yeah, you can catch a tarpon with a 10-weight, but
exactly.
In our world where it's all catch and release, I think that heavier rod can cut down your fight time too. You can, like you said, you can lean into that fish a little bit. Get them. You're not trying. You not want to fight these fish for 20 minutes. You want to get them in at the end of the day.
You bring up a good point. The weakest point in my leader is often 30 pounds. So like I can pull on those fish. Like I got a 30-pound break section in my leader. And I don't know anybody that can pull 30 pounds on a fly rod, I think, back when I was experimenting with leaders and stuff, we were using fishing scales, like weight scales tied to fence posts and trying to pull on them. And unless you're walking straight back with a rod completely straight at it, you're kind of maxing out at that 16 to 18 pound range. So yeah, with a strong leader and a good backbone, and you don't want to give these fish any line. Like you know, I'm not putting them on the reel. I'm telling them to strip them in. I mean, if the fish runs and takes line, sure, one thing, but you're trying to reduce those fight times, get them in a net quick, handle them as little as possible, and get them back. Because the target is always, as any angler, the bigger fish. So those bigger fish are the older females that are very important to the fishery. And although we're trying to stick a piece of iron in their face, we do want to take care of them.
Yeah.
There's a couple of actually interesting ones that brings up in my mind too, like with the not giving him much, like realizing or remembering that pike are those kind of like short sprint predators that don't actually have a lot of gas in the tank. Like they aren't meant for like sustained output of energy. You fight them, as long as you worry to steelhead or something in cold water, and it's pretty easy to kill them. It's definitely not for them. And then it's always advisable, like fishing big flies rather to go barbless. If you're in weed and stuff, and you give them an inch, they get around a weed and you get a little slack in your line, I always find, and then they just drop the fly, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, barbless is definitely key.
Yeah, for sure.
They're
agree with you guys. Like 8 to 10, I think 11 and up is too much. Muskie's a different beast, but the one thing I will say that I kind of like in a pike rod is something softer, which I think is kind of against conventional wisdom. Maybe not for somebody who's cast a lot of pike flies, but like a lot of anglers just kind of buying a rod wherever they're thinking, okay, big flies, big fish, I need a stiff rod, something really fast. Like power is good, a lower end, but like one of my go-to type rods I've got here is I've got Loomis NRX 9-weight, which is actually kind of fast, but it's not a crazy stiff rod. Like I think something that gets overlooked with casting bigger flies, especially like if you're casting little funny leeches, whatever, it almost doesn't matter the action. But if you're getting into like heavier, like not just bigger, but physically heavier flies, you have some mass. One thing I think that a lot of people neglect is the amount of shock that the fly puts in the line when it straightens. You can call it like a tuck effect. So a lot of fluid straightens and that fly whips underneath the line and kind of shocks it. And with a softer rod, it's kind of absorbed back into the rod and it sort of keeps tension on things. It smooths it out. Whereas fast rod, there's no real give. It hits the back and recoils a little bit. And then you kind of lose your tension and lose some of that power in the cast. So I actually kind of like the softer tip rods.
Yeah, I agree. Like my boat rods are the Redington Predators. They're a real mid flex, nice mid range price point rod that most people that are getting into the sport, you don't have to spend a ton of money on, but they're very effective because they do have that center, very mid flex. They load up really well into the cork, but on the cast, like you said, there's almost no shock. And when you're doing more of like a Belgian style cast, trying to keep the fly away from your head, or even if you're not able to double haul, teaching people to water load, it can really help load that rod up and propel a fly with a single back cast. Like we don't want to be doing 4 or 5 double hauls to get these flies out here. You're going to kill your arm. 1, maybe 2 back casts and let her fly. And with like a heavy pike taper, like a proper line, like I use I use Redington rods, but I use a lot of SA lines. Anything in the Titan tapers, those things are so heavy and weight forward, and with the integrated different sink rates, they really do just 1 backcast and you can bomb out 40-50 feet. Like within, even if you don't have much experience, it's not hard to get them out there. It's a half decent distance. So yeah,
and like that would be something as well to mention. Like if you want to cast big flies, you need the heavier rod because you need the heavier rod. If you want to move something that weighs X amount in your fly, you need a line that generates at least enough power to move that thing. So bigger.
Well, that's the only reason. That's the only reason you're going to go to an 11 weight is for the fly. It's not for the pike.
Exactly.
I mean, that's all it is.
Yeah. Cool. Pretty well covers rods, I think. Pretty simple stuff off the top there. Something else. I mean, maybe one other thing would be like guide size, like kind of saltwater design rods or predator design rods, and like bigger guides. So if you do have bulky reviews going through, sometimes it's a little nicer. But
definitely. Really one quick thing is with, like, I use a lot of sinking lines or slow sinking lines, like type 3s, things like that. On all your rods, I haven't seen a rod where this doesn't have effect, is after, a little while using it, just check your tip guide for any grooves or wear. even the best rods in the market, those aggressively, they're like they're textured, right? So they're gonna wear away at the tip of your rod eventually. So it won't, it can cause line damage, but more importantly, it can cause a lost fish. So every trip or so, because I use my rod so often, I run a Q-tip through my tip top guide just to make sure there's nothing snagging my
You are
line.
fishing a hell of a lot more than me, aren't you?
Mhm.
I've ever grooved a rod, but that's
Yeah.
I do get on guys, especially with the pike fishing, those days where you're just casting, you're working
Hmm.
shoreline versus the sight fishing days where it's a cast here, a
Yep.
cast there. When you're doing that cast all day, I really do get on my guys, just check your ferrules throughout the day because
Great point.
eventually it goes out and it's just sort of a pain in the butt. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's
and that
just a
can
little
break a
thing to
rod.
stay on top of. If you're casting all day, you got to check those ferrules.
And that can break a rod too. I've had plenty of the female ferrules blow up
Yeah.
from that. Yep. No, great point.
That's a good one. Cool. Oh, we might come back to that if we think of anything else, but that's
Sure.
good. Did you consult your notes there, or we did have a few questions come in we could touch on?
Sure. Show us a question. I got
Cool.
my
All right,
notes.
let's go down the list real quick. I don't think there's anything that's going to take too much time.
I was trying to see the
Primary
chat.
topic. Want to try? What's that?
I was trying to see the chat.
Oh, we
Oh, you
won't
gotta
see
go
it on
to
our end.
YouTube stream to see it.
Oh,
This is
okay.
like a private Zoom meeting that we're shooting out. From Junaid. Oh wait, no, it's a comment. Want to go? It's awesome. Canadian gemstones. Yeah, 9 to 10 weight. It can be a little much. I think you'll hear like a lot of our fishing is actually like sight fishing or specific shots. We're not doing a ton of like crazy blind casting, so it's not as tiring as you'd think. You can use the 8 weight for sure.
Mhm.
We're not going to do any tying tonight, Junaid, and we'll show off some flies for sure. But Matt and Andrew have both done tying streams with us, so you can go back and check some of those out. Is it worth waiting the grand for pike on these 10-degree days? I'd say yeah.
It's always worth it.
Yeah, you may just be fishing a little slower with the cold water, like Matt was saying. Water temps in 30.
Yeah. Maybe find a weighted fly, something you can get really nice jiggy, slow motion. Like with
Low and slow.
low and
Yeah,
slow for sure.
even
This
think of
might
like
this
like maybe even swing something, like take
Yeah,
off.
like this might be a little big, but something that's got a lot of like tungsten worked into the shank. Like this is a kind of a neat way of tying. I don't know if you can see it. I take 4.5 mil beads and I thread them on a piece of backing, and then I
Nice.
tie them into the bend on the hook, so it's a little bit more dense than lead. And this three of these beads, this fly sinks, but it's also weedless rigged, so I can drag that on the bottom and give it with a floating line, get a real good hoppy action and let it just die. Like the dying motion when the water's cold is so important. Like letting that fly have bottom contact, um, getting little dust clouds as it kicks off, very important on cold water.
And
Yep.
like even simpler, you could take like I
Yep,
think we all
exactly.
have like basic bunny leech and really just
We
like
might all have those.
Yeah.
just like swing it like you would steelhead. I bet you you'd get fish doing that when it's real cold.
Yeah.
We're getting to the
Oh,
point
and
where it's crazy cold, or crazy slow.
and also focus if you're in a river, just focus on those frogwater sections. Anywhere it's calm, get out of the current this time of year. You know, definitely a lot of people don't talk about river pike in North America. It's very popular in Europe. But focusing when the water's in the 30s, you got to find water that's not moving, but near current and near structure to
Yeah.
allow them to move into to find food or have food brought to them. Because this time of year, they're going to be focusing on a lot of dead or dying bait. So whatever that is coming downriver, they just want to almost just kind of move in, eat it, and kind of go back and hold. Carry a thermometer too, even when you're waiting. Just try to find the warmest water.
Maybe you know about a feature like a bit of like a water treatment plant runoff or something.
Yeah,
Sometimes the area might be worth checking out.
definitely. Good question.
On a much smaller or a smaller river system like the Rideau, I don't know if I'd call that smaller.
That's pretty
Is the
big.
middle channel worth targeting, or is it usually mainly fishing slacks, lily pads? Are you gonna find larger fish in those sections? Probably depends on time of year. I don't know if you
Time
guys
of
want
year. Time of year.
so all of the above. I think we're gonna talk about that a lot. So
Yeah.
we'll get to it. But yeah, Rideau, yeah.
Time of year.
Take a look.
Rideau's.
Cool. All right, well, let's kick off. You, Matt, you have the list in front of you. What was your first question?
Sure. Okay, one that I'm always interested in. You know, a bit of a technical angler. I always like to think about like different leader formulas and stuff that people use. So question for both of you is, depending on fly and like areas you're fishing, how does your leader formula change? Like going from sinking lines to floating lines, big flies, small flies. I know how mine does, but I'd love to hear from you guys.
Yeah.
I don't know, I'll take it first. Sometimes I don't, because I get clients, and some clients show up with their own leader. Say, hey,
Yep.
this is the leader I want to use, and I will run with that, as long as it works.
Yeah. One break
Yeah,
off, that's it.
yeah. The leader that they start the trip off with is not always the same style that we end up with, but I think generally my general theory is if I'm thinking more finesse, like I
Mhm.
like that 20-pound wire.
Okay.
So I had something like a small bait fish or something like that. Or say I was throwing a bunny leech and I'm trying to sight fish. I'm trying to go with a very light wire, 20 pounds, so it doesn't have a big sink rate.
Mhm.
Um, and as I get into the bigger flies, you can talk about furl leaders or leaders with a snap and things like that. But
Mhm.
for me, finesse, tie direct, light wire. If I'm thinking more search and destroy and aggressive working shorelines, then it starts to get a little bigger. But maybe
Okay.
a snap. That's
Cool.
that's generally
Bigger as in heavier, not longer.
yeah, not necessarily longer. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'd say that the one key with that is if you're making your own leader, if you're having trouble getting that fly to turn over, you start to shorten and stiffen.
Mhm.
And that's at the end of the day, it's just whatever you got to do to get that fly rolling over the way you want.
Yeah. Valid
Makes sense.
point.
Yeah, I'm with Andrew in terms of material. I mostly run wire. For muskie, I run a lot of fluoro. I'll use a little fluoro sometimes, officially, like maybe Lake Ontario, where you have like really clear water. If you have to fish
Mhm.
slower, but usually wire, and usually the 20. Like I don't think turnover aside, you need to go heavier than that. For pike,
Sure.
generally, pike are like they have piercing teeth, but I wouldn't describe them as like really like cutting teeth, like a barracuda or something, where like they
Mhm.
just like if it's something, it's gone. I don't know if
Mhm.
you guys would agree, but like future end use fluoro and like barracuda, it's like gone as soon
Mhm.
as they cut it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like people land them on 10-pound, 12-pound fluoro if they just get them in the right spot. Like I find the teeth aren't quite as sharp on the edges, and like a 20-pound pike is like world class, ridiculous, huge. So I'm not worried about the breaking strength. I find you
Sure.
just get better action done. So I'm almost always running 20 wire, just like the
Okay.
braided Rio or SA or whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
Great
What
stuff.
about your actual nylon or fluorocarbon portion to your fly line? Like,
yeah.
does that change
So
length?
I do have some leader building supplies here. I thought we'd talk about leaders, but one thing I will say, I don't know if you guys agree with floating lines. I usually sort of equate them to like your sight fishing scenarios in shallower water where you're fishing protected bay, usually not a lot of wind. Like I feel like a lot of the time you're presented with slightly spookier fish sometimes. And
Mhm.
because you're fishing, like sight fishing season is usually like early, not always, but like a lot of the time earlier season where you're fishing smaller flies like our bunny leeches and stuff. I know I don't need to turn over a big fly. I usually go a little bit longer. I don't know about you
Yeah.
guys. I usually go like 8 feet, maybe even below 10, but like, I don't know, I do about that. And then if I'm more blind casting, stripping, sinking lines, I might go a little shorter. Um,
How
I,
short?
I, yeah.
6'5". My definition of short is not like even for steelhead, like my short swinging leader is like 4 feet, where I know a lot of
Mhm.
people it's like a foot. So my definition
Yeah.
is really different. But
Fair enough.
No, but I would agree with what you're saying is that if you're talking about length, yeah, if you were to go longer, it's that sight fishing situation.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because if you're throwing a bit, that big attractor pattern that you're fishing fast,
Mhm.
they're looking at that. They're not paying a whole lot
Mhm.
of attention to anything else.
So yeah. So yeah, that's
Cool.
why. And I like the snap. There's another knot that I
Yeah.
really like for wire. It's called maybe it's got another name. We call it jam knot. It's shown to me
Jam knot.
by
Yeah.
uh, like old time fisherman, like amazing angler around here, musky guy primarily, and he showed it to me like, and we were all just baffled like that. You're kidding? Like it's the dumbest thing ever, but it's always held up. And it's
Yeah.
just a really simple loop knot that you tie with wire.
Yeah.
I've got a video back in the archive somewhere if you want to look it
Yeah,
up.
is that where you're putting the knot in the line and then you do your
Yeah.
loop knot?
Yeah, no, all it is it's overhand knot in the wire, tighten it.
Yeah.
Tie a
As
second
tight as you can get.
overhand knot behind it. Don't tighten that one completely. Feed
Yeah.
the seated knot through the eye and back through the unseated overhand knot and just tighten it up so it just slips together. It's just a little slip knot. It's the dumbest thing. It's just two overhand knots, but it's
Super
amazing.
strong though.
It works. Yeah, I've used that knot a lot.
It's easy to change flies, that's for sure. I use that a lot for sight fishing because it's small, no snap, all that kind of good stuff. I think I have a similar process. Like I don't think I go longer than 8 feet though for my leaders for sight fishing.
Yeah, and I'm probably about the
and
same.
I like
Probably extreme. Yeah.
and I still like a stiff leader. Like I'll run 40 pound for like 3 or 4 feet, and then I'll run like 20 pound for 2 feet, and then I'll run my leader. Um, but one thing is I do like to go really short with my sinking lines, and maybe a little bit different than you. I often go down to like 2 feet of nylon and 1 foot of bite wire, so 3 feet. I like that because it just gets everything down fast, especially if I'm fishing in cover, emergent cabbage, things like that. Again, like Andrew mentioned, the fish aren't seeing your line. And with new sinking lines, I mean, they're pretty much invisible underwater. They're that nice gray, green, brown color. They just blend right in. Uh, Considering when I see, some of the musky lines I use conventionally are like fluorescent, so I can see where the casts went and stuff. I don't think they're afraid of it. And it'll get even shorter if I'm fishing deeper water with like a type 7 or something like a depth charge line, just so it pulls that fly right down and gets it down quick. But other than that, I think we're kind of all on the same page. Makes sense. Cool.
Yeah. And then like to Andrew's point, like if you're struggling,
Yes.
bigger fly,
Stiffen.
bigger wind, anything like that, just heavier, shorter. But I don't know. I had some material here to kind of show what my leader looks like. But maybe you guys want to comment, or I don't know if you have your own there. But
I'm all about 40-pound butt section. I love it, and usually 20 to 25-pound break section if I need it. If I'm fishing around like lots of wood, if I don't need it because I'm fishing in like weeds or something, I'll eliminate the break section. I'll just run 40-pound or 30-pound because I'm not worried about breaking my fly line, and it just accelerates that turnover with a large fly and really lays it out there straight. But otherwise, yeah, it's probably give me the exact same stuff.
Yeah, I probably run like on my finesse stuff. I run 20 pound. I might have a 40 pound butt section, 20 pound. 16 inches. Yeah.
So if you hear us talk about like break sections, what it's getting at is that most freshwater fly lines are going to break like 30 pounds, if that. And so you don't want to be running like straight 40-pound break right through, because then if you hook a log or something you have to break off, you're losing the fly. So we just have, it's going to be like a chunk of some kind of stiff material. So I'll use either like 50-pound nylon or fluoro. Fluoro is a lot heavier, so it will sink a good bit faster if you're fishing off like floating line. Just for stiffness to turn over, and then you go down to like some lighter amount for whatever length, and then so it's just mechanical. But yeah, pretty simple. Cool. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
And maybe talk a little bit about like length of wire too. I hear that asked a good bit.
I always start with like 15, 16 inches because I can cut it back as it kinks, unless I'm using titanium leaders, which I've started using more of. I do titanium for a lot of sight fishing because it's very thin and it's rigid. Like it literally every movement, every little, if I'm bumping a fly with like 1/2 inch bumps, that there's no stretch in the system, there's no coiling happen. It really makes that leech fly hop. And on a bonus, that one titanium leader will last you a season if you got good knots. It's amazing stuff. Otherwise, it's all 25-pound like SA bite wire stuff, solid nylon coated. But be prepared to cut it off and retie if you're catching a lot of fish multiple times a day. Maybe it's in my area where the fish are pressured, but I find that when that coily leader gets really in there, it starts to affect how committed the strikes become. They might start nipping at it or following it versus, and maybe it's just me being in my head. I don't know.
I'm probably in that 16-inch range when I'm tying, with the tieable stuff, just so I can cut it once or twice. And I get, I know what you're talking about, where you get that sort of 2 inch of pigtail.
Yeah.
I have definitely pushed it quite a bit just to sort of experiment. I've never broken it. I mean, it's not a worry of breaking. If it pigtails, it's just sort of the presentation can start to get a little. After a little while, it doesn't look so good, and I change it out. But I've never had an issue where it's like, it's going to break, and I have to change it. That's not a concern.
Do you use any special knots for tying direct to the fly like that with the wire, or to a clip or anything like that?
No, I do a loop knot, just a standard loop knot.
Gotcha.
and up to a uni to uni knot.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
the
Same with
only
me.
thing I do is on the wire on the uni to uni, I do 3 turns of the wire,
Yeah.
and on the fly
Smart.
side, I do 3 turns of the wire there too. If you
Smart.
add a fourth, it's funny. You add a fourth in, and it just
Yeah.
three's the magic number in my books.
Exactly. The three. And to me, I fish to almost always have some sort of fast hatch clip because we're changing flies often. I just actually use a standard clinch knot, like a 3-turn clinch knot to the clip. I've
Yep.
never had that fail. Like it's a super simple knot. Like you mentioned, you never have to worry about that wire failing. It's strong stuff.
And what would you say is like minimum length?
6 to 8 inches for my fish because they're not 45 inches every fish.
Yeah. Oh, not every one of mine is 45, but yeah, no, I'm probably at like if I get down to 12 inches or under, I start getting under 12 inches, I get a little, yeah.
So you think you get like even a 35-inch fish, it's probably got like
Yeah.
a 10-inch long head. If it
Yeah,
swallows a fly,
exactly.
you're going like, yeah, no.
Yeah.
No, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. A couple other quick questions that had come in there. Last one. What else do you guys look for sight fishing pike besides structure? Maybe we'll come back to that one because I think we'll get on to some of that.
My next question is structure related.
Yeah, I knew we were coming around. Thoughts on beetle on wire? It is coated
Mhm.
steel,
I've used it.
yeah. It
What,
feels
I've used it.
like
what wire?
It's just not break strength rated, right? You just don't know quite what the break strength is. So it's like, it's fine. I've used it. I used it. I haven't used it in recent years, but before it was like before bite wire was readily available. It was well known. People were tying intruders with it and all that kind of stuff. But I have seen it fail on intruders. So when there's the big kink, it will break eventually. So keep that in mind.
yeah,
It's
I'm not sure
coated
if it's the
nylon.
same kind of steel.
Yeah, I think it works. I would just make sure that you test it. Buy it, maybe do a scale test. Keep in mind you can probably only pull 15 to 20 pounds. So if it holds up to 15 pounds, it's probably going to be okay. But for the price and what you get, like for me, even though I'm got like this year in the spring from May through early June, I think I'm like just over 35 days of pike guiding. I expect to go through maybe 2 of these,
Mhm.
right? Like it lasts. It's you're putting one on a day, you're cutting it back. Like it's not like you're burning through it. Or buy a thing or a package of titanium, which I should have right here, like the Absolute Predator titanium. It's a braided titanium nickel wire, and this stuff is like it's gonna last you a whole season, no doubt. Put it on a clip, and it's perfect.
Good to go.
Yeah.
Cool. Directly, do you tie direct or use a quick change snap? We do both. Yeah, we
Yeah.
covered that. Without the snap is a little bit lighter. So for small
Mhm.
flies might be advisable, but clips are nice.
Sight fishing.
I really like the Rio fly clips
Awesome.
or
Yeah.
the Mustad Fast Hatch or SA has the cross locks.
And if I'm fishing bigger fish, and this might be related more to musky, but if I know I'm on a lake where there's larger fish, I often will just use a split ring and split ring pliers to attach my fly. It's bomber. It's never going to come undone. And they're lightweight. It's a technique that is kind of coming from conventional musky world of getting rid of failure points. So it works really well, and they're very small. So something to consider too.
That's my conventional musky fishing now. My conventional gear is all split rings. I don't use snaps
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah. I've had too many of them open up.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's a lot more,
Even the
but you
state.
can generate that with conventional musky gear. You can generate a lot more than
Totally.
16 pounds of pressure, and
Yeah.
that's what's opening that snap up. I mean, the fly
Exactly.
fishing world, I haven't had that.
Yeah.
And
And
that's why guys.
Yeah.
if you're trolling and stuff, like it really does hang up on a rock. There goes $100 bait. So
Yeah.
Hard to get that much force fly.
totally. But it is small, and it does allow you to put on like very like easy enough to change, but it's a small profile, so it's kind of cool.
Most versatile fly.
Oh, bunny leech.
Yeah. That one.
Leech.
I think we're gonna cover them, but that's pretty hard to beat.
Or maybe a black.
Whistler.
Black is just so good. I like a black whistler.
I gotta say, I'm a big fan of one of Andrew's other favorites.
Oh,
yeah.
that's a classic.
Yeah.
It just works.
Yeah.
I
will say, but
it gets held up for like 5 inches.
Yeah, I will say my best fly last year was the yard sale, 100%.
Mhm.
Like this fly with a walk the dog action, like for covering water. I shouldn't say it's the most versatile because it doesn't, sight fish as well as like a leech or something you can drop in their face. But for covering water, something that moves left, right, up, down on each strip, you have no idea where it's going on each strip. It just seems to like blow those fish's minds. Most flies, they just see vertical and dropping, vertical and dropping. This going left, right, up, down on each strip. I mean, it's called the yard sale for a reason. He took a yard sale.
I might go outside the box a little bit if I'm looking for something versatile. That's more of a big fish fly, and I actually don't. I have a bunch of these. I haven't finished the heads off them, but a Monster Magic,
Oh,
which
cool.
is like a 12-inch fly,
Like
and
the
that's
Northern Magic kind of, but like, what do
well,
you?
no, yeah. So yeah, the Northern Magic, you're in that sort of six
Yeah,
6 inch
six
range.
to eight.
The
Yeah,
Monster Magic, you're getting into that 12-inch.
cool. Is it
But
SLF fiber on the back?
yeah, like
Yeah.
Slinky
Okay. Cool.
fiber,
Nice. Yeah.
Flash.
Yeah. That looks good.
But I actually, and it's a big fly, and it's funny. And I always, you think of spring fishing, and you think of small baits, and the sight fishing with bunny leeches and stuff. I actually am just as confident going a 12-inch, like sight fishing a big pike laying there with a 12-inch
Oh,
Monster
nice.
Magic, as I am a 5-inch bunny leach. But
Hmm.
in
Oh, very
terms of the
cool.
versatility, but I like that I can fish that fast. I can have a guy fish it fast over the top of a weed bed and
Mm,
strip, or I can just sort of flutter that thing down. It's surprisingly versatile in my opinion for a big fly.
very cool.
Yeah,
Very cool. I kind of want kind of similar. It's one of Brammer's flies, but it's like a synthetic clouser.
yeah,
So it's like slinky fiber and then EP fiber for the wing and for the belly. And it's got a very similar jiggy action, but it's kind of got a bit more like it holds its profile really kind of nicely. Um, but it's very similar, I bet. Like you can fish it in most scenarios, and
yeah.
and I think a good question there would be like maybe it's relatable, but like confidence color. If you had one fly, for me, it's got to be something with some white on it. Like I'm fishing it above the fish. All
Yeah.
fish have white bellies. They look up if you're fishing most of these flies, so they're looking up at the bellies of most fish. And I feel like white just stands out in all watercolors. Something that you can see too. So as a guide, like I can tell you when to strip set if you didn't see that eat, or they can see the fly get eaten. Makes it easy to identify because a lot of times these fish push from behind, and you might not feel anything. You just see it disappear and it's gone.
Yeah, I do like flies that I can see, and that seducer that Chris was holding up, that red and yellow, you're gonna see that fly in any condition.
This
Yeah.
looks stiff here. This gets so soft in the water.
Yeah,
It falls nuts.
just move and yeah. No, I like flies that I can
Yeah.
see. I don't know. It's hard to get away from black for me though. In that
Mm-hmm.
clear, I don't know. I just,
Fair. Yep. That's fair.
but it does suck. But for visuals, it's hard to see it. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But I don't know.
Not
So
bad.
I maybe tend to throw it more in clear water where I have that. Yeah, the white and chartreuse. I don't know. They all work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they do. I feel like my fishery's so day to day down here. Like one day they're really on white and chartreuse, one day they're on fire tiger, one day they're on black, and it's just a matter of if you hopefully have two anglers, just kind of start process of elimination each day. Try to use, what's the day like? Is it really overcast? What's the watercolor you're fishing? Is it darker? Is it clear? What do you think the bait fish is present? Like, if is it weedy? Is it more panfish and crappie or maybe walleye, or is it out in the main lake and we're fishing over ciscoes and smelt? So for me, white has just been a confidence fly. I think at any given time, somebody in my boat's throwing a white fly, and then someone's usually throwing either black or bright, like fire tiger.
Mm-hmm.
Just to see what's going on. And the
Yeah.
person that's throwing black or fire tiger, I'm often changing their flies out more and whites on their line, other person's line more often, I find.
No, like I do a lot of just natural stuff. I mean, like
Oh yeah.
just those sort of
Yep.
natural, just a natural bait fish, white belly,
Perfect.
bit of flash.
Perfect.
It could be a Cisco, could be
Totally.
smelt. It could, it just
Yep.
represents anything.
Everything. Yeah.
Just I don't know. I
Awesome.
could fish. I could. I mean, I would probably fish something like that in anywhere there's pike
Yeah.
and catch them.
Totally. 100%. 100%. Yeah. That's awesome looking fly. Cool.
Let's rotate it up a little bit. Let's go to you, Andrew, and maybe
Yeah.
let's hit on a little bit of like instead of so much gear, let's chat a little like strategy, where, when, kind of stuff.
All right, yeah, because I had a few questions. Well, we could talk about I was curious what some of your go-to. I think we sort of touched on this, but just search flies.
Mm,
Like when you have it, and when you have it in your mind that okay, maybe we got to pound some shoreline, or like we can't sight fish today,
great
and
question.
we just got to go and chuck. Like where do you kind of go?
You want to take that, Chris? Start?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I like something like Matt was saying that's gonna twitch and move a little and maybe push a little bit of water
Mhm.
within reason. I mean, even the sea deucer, I think, pushes water because it's
Mhm.
got like that heavy hackled head, so it moves a little. But like for a little bit of a bigger fly, I know Matt's big on one very popular musky fly, the yard sail. I'm really popular. I'm really hot on another one, which is Buford, which
Oh
in
yeah,
my mind it's an oversized mudlet. And this is like not a huge one. This is like 6 inches total. Not
Yeah,
massive.
me too, man.
This one actually, that pike pick of me that we used to promo the event, well, it was on this exact fly. This is
yeah,
a white Buford that had a custom orange tip dye job from sitting in my
Love
box
it.
with orange flies.
that's nice.
But yeah, that took those fish. And yeah, I love these. Throw a rattle in too if you want. They just
Yeah.
push a little bit. And they're
Oh,
pretty
dude,
easy to cast. Like
very.
that's one thing I really consider as well if you're blind casting is you're gonna cast a lot. So I want something that's not gonna kill me to cast a
Yeah,
lot. And the Buford is actually like for its size, insanely lightweight. Like you can really fall on these things. So yeah, that's it for me.
Great fly.
Oh, I mean, the other one
Um,
to throw in there maybe would be like a changer, like a
mhm.
yeah,
trailer changer or a crafty changer. I really like. Downside is they're a little on the heavier side. So like, I
yeah.
don't
Yeah.
mind these if I'm doing a little bit less casting, like maybe I'm in a river environment or I don't cast super far. But if I really want to cover water and huck something, Buford, Seabees, or something light.
Yeah.
I find with the changers, you gotta almost like shake the water out of them first before you cast,
Yeah.
especially when they start getting big. When you're throwing like 6, 8 inch changers, they just hold so much water. And if you try to false cast that right away, you're just gonna peg yourself in the face. So almost like give it a shake and then you're good. But great fly. No, those are. I mean, I got two of those here on my bench, so
Yeah.
good choices. Okay, to throw a little bit different. So when I'm searching for fish with two anglers, I'm going to have two different presentations, one that goes left to right and one that's jiggy. Those two different motions. And that's going to be like first is color, second is action. And I try to narrow it down throughout the day. So left to right, we talked about the yard sale by the gentleman Makarjewski who ties them. He also ties one called the slip and slide. This has been a good one for me. It's very similar, but it incorporates a lot of bucktail instead of just slinky fiber. I use a slinky fiber for the tail instead of like hackles, so it's very durable and it's articulated in this. The yard sail I throw for pike is almost always the single yard sail. It's 6 inches long. It's not 8 inches long. I like that size for searching in my fish. Again, keeping in mind the average fish we're interacting with in Georgian Bay is somewhere around 28 to 34 inches in that range. With fish every day seeing 34, 35s, with plenty of 40s seen, not always caught. But when I go up to lakes in Muskoka, it changes. It goes to big fish. It doesn't go to numbers. A good day, I think me and Andrew were even talking about this a couple of weeks ago. A great day would be 5 or 6 opportunities. That
Oh
would
yeah.
be unbelievable. Most of those days, it's 1 or 2 eats. And if you stuff up the hook set, that might be it. It's almost more musky fishing there. But the slip and slide has been good. It's a left, right, very wide walking bait. Um,
Mhm.
it's not tied with foam like I tie my yard sail. You look at the yard sail, the single yard sail, I also incorporate foam into the back. I don't know if you can kind of see it on there, but that creates a suspending glide bait style fly on a sinking line. So throwing this on an intermediate or a type 3 line will allow it to hover in front of a pike's face, which is very important. For me, and the fishery I have, keep in mind, they don't seem to eat it on the strip. They seem to almost always eat it on the paws or just before you move it. So the motion of this fly being able to walk and then just hover there, and maybe one of those pieces of flash just quivers in front of the pike's face, and then they eat it. So lots of left and right, very important. The next I want to do is think about something that has some vertical action. So I already showed this one, but it's a good one to show again with the tungsten weight on the belly of these Texas hooks. I get a very obvious jiggy action. And it has that death fall. It just crashes to the bottom and allows a nice dust cloud to appear. If you have a following fish, you might be able to change them into an eating fish by letting it hit the bottom. But I go a lot I go to a lot of Euro style flies now. So things that have like the Poccarini tails, with a lot of resin on the head, so there adds weight. There's no additional weight on this fly, but I don't know if I have one here. Yeah, I do. These large cone heads, gonna be kind of hard to show off on camera, but these like extra large, huge cone heads, they add a lot of weight, and I'll actually slide them onto my leader so that
Yeah.
this kind of runs up on the nose of the fly to give it that dying action. And then you lift it, and that tail just like just really rips, and it can get their attention. So often I have a bit of a science on it. I think the person in the front of the boat is throwing a bait that's more active and it's walking, and the person at the back while we're searching is throwing a jiggy fly, because the jiggy fly seems to be a bit more of a neutral fish. You'll still get aggressive fish, but it tends to accept, more of a neutral hit. It'll often hit, like the fish will just suck it in, versus those walking baits where they tend to annihilate them.
Yeah.
So that's
Well,
my thought.
and you want that because you want that lead guy quite often with the most aggressive bait
Yes,
because he's going to
yes,
catch those
totally.
active fish, and then
Yeah,
your guy behind or the second rod is your follow up, so that when you get the rejection,
yeah,
okay, here's the something that's a little bit more subtle, a little quieter.
got it.
Okay, they may be
Yeah.
into that.
That's a great point. Like even having someone ready to throw back, you have a follow and that fish turns away at the boat, but you know the direction it went. You might be able to throw that fly that has that vertical action back in that general direction of the fish. And a lot of my flies with tails, almost all of them incorporate a stinger hook. So now that can be a little tricky if you're getting into fish that are inhaling baits, and you're digging them out of like the tops of mouths or like gills. But keep in mind, my trailer hook is always vertical position, so it keeps it away from the gills a lot of the time. If you had that in a downward angle, you're always going to get them in the gills, and that's the hard part. Like I obviously know we're fishing and fish are going to die, but you try not to. If you get one to take it deep, this is still barbed. I will pinch it before I fish it, but it'll almost always hook them in the top of the mouth, so it's a nice safe hookup for the most part. Just keep in mind there's a second hook when you're unhooking fish.
You don't want to forget that.
Yeah, I've been hooked a couple times when you just get in the heat of the moment, you just totally forget there's a stinger.
But
Even just brushing the fly, you'll hook yourself.
oh yeah. But I think that's good. So when we're talking about search flies, the flies that you guys sort of went to are flies that move or pushing water
Yeah,
that can pull that's going to sense, it's going to trigger their lateral lines a little farther out to bring them to your fly, which is what you're trying to do. You're
yeah,
trying to search and you're trying to get them to find your fly. It's not
you
there's a
got it.
fish. Okay, we're going to put the leash on it. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's flies that move water and trigger.
Well, I can't take that from like my conventional fishing. Like my absolute, without a doubt, top two baits. Number one, husky jerk. Like just something that can, twitch and pop whatever, but give nice
I'm not a
pop,
rebel.
whatever. Buford. And
Yeah.
then the other would be I don't really have a direct comparable on a fly, but like a large, medium large Vibrax, just an inline spinner.
Oh, cool.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I just fished on light.
It's amazing
Right.
how small they'll take.
Best go-tos. Like Lake Ontario,
Yeah,
like
good lord.
in prime like active fish scenarios, not like cold weather periods, but like May, June,
Well,
like little inline grows so deadly. So against something that's
It's
moving water.
you've
and like
you've
you're talking like a number four, number five.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
I
it's
think
Not like not
guys
these.
think big. No, it's oh yeah,
yeah, it's
Yeah.
small.
the biggest pike eat those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And that vibration is so hard to imitate on a fly. But Chris,
You
I
got
haven't
some.
shown anybody, but I'm crossing the lines, blending lines between fly and knot.
People did
And
100 years
um,
ago.
Colorado blade on a trailer of a jiggy fly. That thing just hovers and spins on the way to the bottom, and when you rip it, it creates a ton of flash and vibration. I'm not afraid to say it's missed blending the lines. I just know it
Yeah.
works. It's a bit hard to cast though, because it is a lot of extra weight. So just open up your loops, but it's got even like a split shot in there on the shank. You can see like I've added so it
I
really has
was
that
pretty
nose.
impressed though. We were out steelheading back in January, and
Yeah,
Matt had just tied these and brought them out just if he wanted to see what they looked like in the water. And
yeah,
I took a stab casting. It might have been that exact fly, or
it is. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
that thing was a breeze. Like casting it sort of Belgian style, or like with
yeah.
an English loop. And like I mean, I don't know what we were casting at, but like 80 feet pretty easily
Oh,
with
nice.
all that
Yeah.
weight.
I don't know if I was casting 80 feet, but
Yeah, I was pretty pleasantly surprised. I'm gonna fish with.
yeah, it's pretty cool. And that also I should mention is kind of cool. It's on a piece of wire that's bent into like a loop. You won't be able to see it on here, but the split shot's removable, so I can adjust the weight on the
Well,
water.
that's gonna keel it more reliably too, because
Heal
you're
it, but I can
using the
also
weight
I can
to
put
get
on
back.
like this is one that I know for like even like pre-spawn Lakers. Like I could put on a massive split shot and get that thing down in 20 feet of water in no time. But I can take it off because it's got the butterfly wings of a split shot and put on a smaller one.
Ah,
So it's
smart.
really weird, but it's fun. I like that. Like, the best part about fly tying, right? Um,
Nice.
so
What
now I'm
about
prepared to get all the.
so I like all that. What about like talking a little bit about seasons? Like I think people like everyone loves flies and they're good, but I feel like where people get hung up, they look at a big body of water sometimes and they, where do I begin? Like,
Breaking it
Matt,
down.
you're fishing Georgian Bay. It doesn't get much bigger than that.
Okay.
You're up in
Yeah.
Williston, that's a huge lake. Like,
Yeah.
it's maybe break it down. Like, where should people look for pike?
Do you mind if I take a stab first?
Really?
So when I utilize a bunch of different bits of mapping software and hardware, if you want to call it that. So paper charts, right? Like they're fantastic to just quickly jot, locations where you want to check out or ones that have fish. I also utilize Google Maps all the time because it gives you actually like weed growth. You can see where the back bays have how much, if they have lily pads, they're obviously going to have some sort of cabbage. You got sandy bottoms, so you can see that. Which is important because when you go fishing in the spring, those weeds aren't up yet, but they might be up a few inches and you just can't see them. And then on my boat, the Navionics charts, whatever chart system you have, they're in the moment when you're actively fishing. Navionics also has an awesome web app, so you can just like cruise at home and actually see your charts on your cell phone. Um, First thing first is where I fish. You could argue that most lakes have some sort of start with some sort of river. Rivers fill the lakes. It's kind of the way it works. So in let's say Georgian Bay, where I fish in Severn Sound, um, there's multiple river systems. Like the Gibson River, the Moon River, Severn River comes in. Like there's like in the one section there's like 6 major rivers and a bunch of smaller tributaries, right? And every one of those systems I treat as their own, like have their own resident fish. Like I kind of look um, up like inland as far as possible for opening day almost, right? And I wish we could fish really immediate post spawn pike, like ice out, get out there, because they're going to be up in the heaviest, like on the shores in the shallow water, trying to find warm water or still be spawning. But for us, they're usually about a week or two post spawn at that point. So they're going to be in that 3 to 5 foot of water area just off from the spawning base, but I'm going to be very close to them. Water temp is super important. So when I'm cruising an opening day, mid lake temps are often hovering upper 30s to low 40s. 41, 42 is pretty common in Fahrenheit, obviously. But if I can get bays where the water is in that upper 40s or maybe even over the magical number of 50, the fish do seem to be there. The great thing about spring is all the pike are condensed into the same areas. So all the pike in your area, if you know how to read a map or a lake or whatever, they're gonna be like condensed, like heavily condensed in those spots. Maybe not always feeding. If you find a sand flat where the water is a little warmer, those fish are belly on the bottom sunbathing. They've already eaten most likely, and they're up there just trying to digest, but a small fly can trick them into striking. As the season progresses, we're going into the next week of the season. The water temp in those back bays starts getting up into the 60s, maybe. I start to find those fish transition out into the next transition area. So maybe the next break line in the bay, out towards, moving out towards the points in those bays, away from the river mouths. I wish I had a full map here to kind of show you what I mean, but keep in mind when you look at a map of Georgian Bay, you'll see these rivers, and it's almost like there's 3 stages to the fishery. Like you've got your early season where they're up shallow, that early mid-season where they're starting to transition out into the 7 foot, 10 foot range, because the surface temp might be in the 60s, but the bottom temp could still be preferable in the 50 range. And then once you find those weed edges, you're switching more to searching patterns for me. I'm not sight fishing as much. The cabbage has grown up, the fish are in there. Trying to find areas with cabbage weed. I keep saying that it's a broad leafed plant instead of a really skinny hydrilla or like a raccoon tail looking plant. where they have room to move. If it's sorry.
No, sorry. I was messing around with
Oh,
something on the screen.
you're good.
Yeah,
So
you're good.
instead of like condensed weed where it's so thick that the fish can't actively move or see a bait fish they want to eat, I find if you can find one plant every 10 feet or so, those areas seem to be much more productive. Following that season where it's mid-season, they're in the 7 to 10 foot range. They're going to move out of the bays onto rock, trying to find that cool water. Those bays might be in the 70s. Pike are a cold water fish. No matter, we classify them as a warm water species of fish. They are a cool cold water. Muskie have the niche of warm water. Muskie like warm water, 65, 70. They'll be in 80-degree water. Not saying you should fish for them in 80-degree water, but they will be there when pike are in 80 feet of water at that point in my area. And then it just changes fishery to fishery, but it all starts with those rivers and where they come in and where that warm water can be found early in the season. And then just progressively work your way out into those barrier islands and all that. And then it's reverse in the fall.
I don't know. I had a little thing. I agree with all that. I mean, I don't know if you'll be able to see.
Perfect.
We'll see.
Perfect. Yes. Awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
Okay, just to show you an idea, but just to have it, but you can see like a bay here where there's a small entrance in
Yeah.
the spring versus if you have a bay up here that's big and wide open.
Yeah.
Early in the spring, a bay like that is, if you have the right wind, the wind is going to change the temperature of that dramatically. Versus if you have little like choke down areas, maybe you have a little water coming in. Those areas come spring like magnets because because that water that gets trapped in there is allowed to warm up, and then not depending on what the wind does, it can't drop that by 10 degrees or 15 degrees overnight.
Yeah.
And that's where you get
call.
fish that'll stay there and hold in those areas for multiple days. They might be there for multiple days, whereas some of those more wide open spots can be transition, or you're waiting for those closed bays to warm up, and then they come out, so then they come on the outside, and then you're gonna start looking for a tree on the outside or the rocky point or the first little bit of the transition. We call that the transition period, and for us that's sort of that June. June is early. July you have a bit of transition, and then August we're just fishing straight cabbage or weeds.
Do you find that you have like little micro migrations throughout the day? Like I know fishing Lake Ontario, but like a lot of the shore accessible water, fishing out piers and stuff, like into 10 feet of water or whatever, like near shore, like nice milfoil or cabbage beds. Like in the spring they'll be full. You go in July and they're pretty barren during the day. But I found that sometimes you go like real early morning, first light, and you'll find that there are some fish hanging out in there with cooler water. Do you find you get a lot of any of those kind of micro migrations? Or
my opinion, I think if we were talking spring, sun, like if you have sunny day, like sometimes you can check a sand flat in the morning and it's cold, where it's cold overnight and it's empty. And then you go back and check it after in the afternoon as that temperature is climbing, and all of a sudden they just show up. And I've had success, fishing afternoons in the spring. Just as that temperature rises, those fish just come out from a little deeper and they move in where you see them, or they're just a little bit more accessible. I think that's a definite sort of daily thing that can happen.
Yeah, fully agree with that. Nothing else to add. That was awesome.
Yeah. Cool. Do you guys want to touch at all on like fall movements? You say they just kind of come in and sort of repeat almost the spring in your minds, or anything?
Within reason, I find for my fishery they do follow bait a lot more. So one of the big bait fish we have on Georgian Bay is no secret. It's the Cisco, which is otherwise known as a lake herring. They get up pretty big. They get like 18 to 20 inches, but most of the fish are feeding on 4 to 8 inches. But in the fall, the Cisco do spawn, and they spawn on rocky shorelines, usually wind-blown shorelines. And the pike and muskie will often find those and group up and feed in those areas. They'll still be relatively shallow, like you might find them in 10 feet of water. Wind-blown is really key, I find, in the fall, pushing the bait fish into an area where the pike can corral them. And then utilizing your electronics in a different way. So no longer saying, okay, I'm using it just as a map. I'm actively looking for fish with my electronics too. Like I'm trying to mark them.
When you say you're looking for fish, you're looking for I mean, I know you're getting a fancy new live scope this spring, but are you
Well, no,
looking
not
for
this
bait
spring.
or are
I
you
can't. I
looking
can't
for
afford it
fish?
this spring. And so looking for both, but obviously, I should say obviously, but I'm looking for big arcs on my screen that'll show that there's pike in the area. Live scope probably isn't coming this spring. I spent too much money and get my boat repaired and getting all ready to go, but it is coming this fall. But that will make a big difference. Even in 10 feet of water, just going along slowly with your electric motor, like you will spot them. And it's nothing to just drop a fly down and have success getting them to eat it. Um, it's the migration I find is similar. It's back from the deep water, the water's cooling, they're coming back shallower. That's the bait was there in the summer. The bait's now shallow. They might not be in the back weedy bays, but they'll be in the mouths of those weedy bays. So like Andrew had two bays there, in my opinion, is the upper bay, if we call that north, where it was wide open, that'll be more of an area where I find them in the fall on those deep weed lines, rock lines, things like that, versus from my experience anyways, the shallow, really enclosed spawning bays that are holding the warmth because not as much bait fish in my zone.
Yeah.
So where I'm guiding, we're so far north, so we sort of have that, they're shallow, and there's most of the season we're in 10 feet of water or less, like right up
Mm-hmm.
into August. So
That's
I
awesome.
yeah, it's pretty nice. It's pretty
That's
nice.
awesome. I'm jealous.
So when we're not, so our transition, they go shallow, they go out, and then they go into the weeds. So it's different when I used to fish here, and then by September, you don't want to be anywhere near that.
Yeah.
It'd be dangerous. But when I was still fishing in Ontario, I would say, so where you have your spring spots, that shallow bay, when those fish transition out, those initial spots, those early weeds, the rocky points and stuff, I generally would find, getting into October here in southern Ontario, when those water temperatures sort of hit similar temperatures that force those fish out. So outside the bays, now you're having that 60-degree water. When those water temps in the fall start dropping into that similar range, they go back to a lot of those same spots that you
Mm-hmm.
found them when they transitioned out in the spring.
Yeah.
That if you
Gotcha.
go back and check those spots in the fall, chances are you'll find them again. That was my
Mm-hmm.
general experience.
No, definitely. Fully agree with that. Yeah.
Nice.
Following water
I
temps.
don't want to gloss over the fact that you had a couple of nice little trees drawn on that map there, Andrew. Anything you want
Yeah.
to add on that kind of stuff?
Trees. Do we want to tell people about trees?
Sure. I
Okay.
can tell
Okay.
you, so growing up in Ontario, I was a Southern Ontario boy. Growing up here, there were days on pike, spring or fall pike fishing where that was my day. Was I'd just go fish trees. That's
Yeah.
all I
Trees are
would,
so good.
and I didn't necessarily want a tree. I generally, if a tree is like sitting on bottom, I generally found they're not very good. I want a tree that's hanging down that has separation where a fish can get under it and leap out. Now,
Yeah.
where I guide, we have small trees. Like that is not a pattern where I guide. It's just not a thing. But that was my bread and butter here in Ontario.
It's very important here. All
Yeah,
times of
Okay.
year.
Rob,
All times of year.
like that was a big game changer, I know, for Rob as well. After you laying
yeah,
in on that little one a few seasons back,
Yeah.
it's a pattern.
There's
Yeah.
certain lakes that we fish, all of us fish, I'm sure, and plenty of, if any of my guests are on here that have fished with me, where weeds aren't as prevalent in these lakes. They're big oligotrophic lakes. They're deep. We call them lake trout lakes. They might have some weeds in the very backs of the bays, but vertical structure isn't as common. And we all know pike like something growing up, somewhere to ambush bait, right? And while they will ambush bait in rocks, they do like to lie in wait and just belly in the bottom, hide under a tree, wait for a perch to swim by, bang. The tree bite, they can be fantastic, and it can be more than one fish on those trees. Like they can
yeah,
share it.
yeah,
And big fish, like might be like one in the very back and one at the tip. Like they're not going to be belly to belly, but they're going to have their zones. And if you have a tree and a laydown, my favorite tree, similar to Andrew, it's suspended. It's not. It's anchored maybe to the shoreline still in some way, or there's big branches that are anchored in the mud and it's causing it to hold off the bottom. But I want a tree that's nasty. It's been in there for a couple years. I don't really want the ones with leaves still on them. I might give them a quick shot, but I don't anticipate there's much of a biodiversity in there with like insect life starting and bait fish feeding and then pike. Um, the trees that are the best for me always tend to be anything with big branches and like big pines that have fallen into the tree, lots of nooks and crannies for those fish to hold. and fish your fly along the tree. Don't just cast it at the tip. Don't cast at, if the tree's like this, don't cast at it all the time. Like try to cast along it. Bring your fly parallel to the growth of the trunk. Uh, and pick it apart. Like sometimes pike in cold water want it on their nose. So throw a couple wide and then try to pick it into those branches. Throw a couple in each one and move on.
And when that
These
fly
trees are,
that as that fly is sort of clearing that tree, that's a good time to sort of give it a little extra, a couple of hops, but
yes,
kind of like hop it in
pause.
place a little bit,
Yeah.
because that fish, that fly might come off that tree, and they might have to be winding. They might be winding their way through it,
Mm-hmm.
tracking it. But it's like, but don't just sort of come off the end of the tree and just race it back to the boat. Like get it off that tree and
Mm-hmm.
just let's give it a second.
While
Let
you're
them
on that
find it.
topic, never race your fly back to the boat. Fish it to the boat.
Yes, always fish it to
Like
the
the
boat.
amount of times people have just been turned on talking to me, and then
Yeah.
you just see the rod fold, and like you're at your leader. Like I'm not
Oh
saying you
yeah.
have to figure eight every cast like you do musky fishing, but like at least fish the fly to the boat and look 2 feet behind the fly. And every time I do some sort of change of motion. So sweep your rod to the right, sweep your rod to the left. Nobody hits it, nobody follows it, pick it up and recast.
That is a major. That's a major one in my boat. That I
Mhm.
get on my guests about that, because it drives me nuts. And it's so you have a guy and you're fishing along. That fly gets to say 15, 20 feet from the boat, and then it's really nice because it water loads great.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
goes
it
right
sure
into
does.
that next cast, no problem. But
Yeah.
I don't know how many times I've seen it where the guy gets it to 20 feet, lifts it up, and all of a sudden there's a 40-inch pike swim, like literally just ends up at my boat going,
Where'd it go?
where'd it go? So I
Yeah,
tell guys, if you can't see what's behind your fly, don't take it out of the
fishing it.
water. If you're on sand and it's gin clear and you can see, yeah, take it out 20 feet from the boat.
Yeah,
If you have
yeah,
full
yeah,
vision. If you don't have full vision, fish it to your feet and
yeah.
give it something. Yeah.
So key, so key.
That's the yeah.
Cool.
I'm sure Matt and I have a few extra gray hairs due to that.
Yeah, I'm sure. Nice.
I mean, to be fair, like I've done it myself, right? You get lazy
Oh
towards the
yeah.
end of the day. You're
Yeah.
like, you just make that one time where you didn't make an L turn at the boat and you lift up and
Uh,
there's a big white belly flash and you're just like, what am I doing? Like I know
Oh, I've done
better.
enough
or,
on my
or,
feet for
And that's why I use a short leader too, because I can fish it right to the boat, like get right in if I need to figure eight. If you're going to figure eight, we'll talk about this briefly. Fish it to your leader, like get to the bite wire. Like I want to be able to control it with the rod tip. I don't want 6 feet of line out and you're figure eighting. The fly will move and then it'll just pause and it'll jerk and fish it right to the wire leader and then make a big circle or a big eight, whatever you choose. But I like a big circle. I think big fish can turn that corner better. I don't find pike eat on the eight as much as muskie, but we do catch fish often on the eight.
I would agree with that. Yeah. And I don't know why, but yeah, pike will come into the boat, but they're not as aggressive
Yeah,
as a muskie in that last
yeah,
10 feet.
exactly. They are very hesitant, but sometimes it works, so it's worth it. My best, actually, honestly, when I have a following fish, is to often kill the fly right at the boat. Like let that fly just fall, hit bottom, and on cold water, and let that fly sit in their face, and just let that rabbit strip just twitch or whatever. And
Yeah. It,
you
it's
never know.
it's probably different from me because when I'm guiding, I'm on a tiller.
Mhm.
And so when I'm in that situation where I have a following fish, see if it was a muskie coming in, then I'm gonna tell the guy, yeah, just go right into a figure
Oh,
eight,
yeah,
and that's what
yeah,
you're doing. But pike are different, and so
they
the way
are.
I explain that to my guests, but again, because I'm on the till, so I have a guy at the front of the boat and I'm in the back. I'll tell
Hmm.
them what I want is I want to maintain separation between us and the fish. I don't want
Hmm.
that fish getting into the boat.
Hmm.
And we almost end up back trolling it where I'll say, okay, keep that fly 20 feet out, and I'm going to pop it in reverse, or I'm going
Oh,
to
that's
try and
cool.
drift away, or just keep
Uh,
the moving away from that fish, and
mhm.
that guy's able to keep that
Cool.
fly twitching. And we can all, I've had it where I've walked a pike 50 feet across the bay before it eats.
Wow, that's
But
crazy.
that's just that's a guide situation on a tiller. I mean, that it gets harder, but I would try and move away from that fish when I can.
It might even be water body dependent. Like I know if
Yeah,
I turn my motor on and have the actual prop spinning, like they're not,
yeah,
they're out of there. But like an electric
yeah.
motor, it's a little better, but they still spook from an electric
but
motor.
even like if you had the electric going and you had like a bit of wind going, I
Yeah,
mean, I guess in that case though, you're not going to see it.
just drift.
So
But yeah,
Very
yeah,
good,
with
very
me
good tip though. Yeah.
on the tiller, they I find a lot those fish don't necessarily mind the engine running.
That's
They
cool.
hate when you change gear.
Mm.
Totally.
Like,
Yeah.
so if I'm in neutral, like I could be floating across a bay idling, and those fish
Mhm.
are fine. But you click it into reverse, and you hear that clunk. Those fish just
Yeah.
go.
See ya.
That part they don't
Yeah, that's fair.
You have to have two different motors going at once.
like. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, and we have trolling motors on the boats, but yeah, but just
Yeah.
keeping but yeah, kicking in and out of gear like big changes,
Yeah.
they get a little wary.
Clunk.
Yeah, clunk. They don't like clunks.
Yeah. Cool.
Cool. Who's up? I don't think we have any. Actually, maybe we'll take a quick detour. We had a couple questions.
Sure.
Actually, this is a question I had because I haven't done it a whole lot with a lot of success. I've done it for smaller fish, but topwater. You two fish
Mm.
topwater at all?
I'll let Andrew speak to that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I probably don't as much. I have a lot of guests that come in on day one. They go, "I love top water, and if there's a chance to throw, then that's what I want to do." And I'm all for it. And I try it. I find it hit and miss. If they're on it, they're on it. But
Yeah.
overall the overall scheme of things, I have greater success with subsurface flies.
Yeah. I agree.
I if I'm fishing a topwater for pike, I'm doing it for the fun of it. I'm not generally
Mhm.
doing it because I think it's the most effective. There are times when the topwater will clean them up, but
Yeah.
I lean more towards subsurface. But
And is
it
there
does work.
I imagine there's sort of a water temperature window where that's feasible and not.
Yep. Yeah, I like those early mornings, evening. That calm water. Everybody sort of thinks it's classic topwater time. Or if you have weeds that are still that they're not all the way to the surface, you still have that a bit of gap between the tops of the weeds and the surface. That's a good time to where you can fish over the top cleanly. That's a good time
Mhm.
for them too.
It's a great comment. Um,
Uh,
I have at any given time 100 flies in my boat, and maybe 5 of them are top waters. So,
Yeah.
you got to have them because someone's got to ask. And if you're a guide and you say, "Oh, I don't have that," like that's not a good, it's not a
No,
good
no.
answer. But I do have a couple, and I really like articulated poppers, big foam heads, crapper, lots of hackle. It's nice because they do tend to have that articulation. It stops them from throwing those big bulky heads. It also allows on the paws for that body to kind of sink, and I can kind of get below the surface a little bit more on their dinner plate. Now I don't throw them too often, but we already talked about yard sales and foam in the fly. I will fish a floating yard sale with that foam and put it on a floating line, and that fly is going to act a lot more like almost like a Dalberg diver in a way. Like it's going to go down and then it's going to float to the surface, and it's going to strip it. And it's going to go down, go to the surface, and having a little bit of subsurface action seems to get the strikes. Your hits will still be visible, I promise. Even if they're subsurface down a foot or two, you're going to see your strikes. It's exhilarating as hell. You're going to catch more fish fishing subsurface. I mean, I have not seen a pike fishery personally. I haven't fished as far north as you, Andrew, but even when I get up to I go up to Nipigon often. We're going back there in August this year for summer pike when they should be. The water temps are in the upper 50s, like it's prime. They're 10 feet of water, lots of weeds. You might get some follows, you might get some interest, but you just got to get down, even if it's 6 inches, like 6 inches to a foot. They seem to be much more willing. Although in my conventional time fishing, I catch a lot of pike fishing top waters for muskie, and you always think it's a muskie, and it ends up being a pike. So,
I, one thing I sort of as we're talking about this sort of jumped to my mind is that, like when we do fish topwaters conventionally, or we do fish general overarching theme there is subtle seems to be better for us
yeah.
oh yeah,
versus fishing it like you're like trying to fish a popper where you're shooting water like
yeah,
that
no,
doesn't no subtle
almost
yeah
leaving it still,
yeah
like
yeah flat
barely any
tail.
Down,
movement.
down.
Oh,
Yeah,
is that a big sledge with a flat? Oh
Yeah.
yeah, oh there you go, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So like in the water, gliding,
yeah.
not so much giant pop, maybe.
Yeah,
yeah, I
like
agree.
you just you're not necessarily trying to make a huge commotion on the surface. Just working something a little. I don't know. Like, you think of it like a little mouse going across the surface. Like
Mhm.
they're not
Mhm.
going wide.
Or watch a bait fish dying on the surface. Like
Yeah, it's pretty
take
subtle.
a minnow and pinch his minnow's head and throw it in the lake and watch it just quiver, right?
Yeah,
Like that's kind of what
that's
you're
what it.
looking
Yeah,
for.
it's a quiver, and I don't know.
Yeah.
That seems
You
to
see,
trigger more
you see
bites
that,
than.
yeah. you see the rings just kind of constantly going away from the dying bait fish. So it's like pop, 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 pop.
Yep. Yep.
Little pops, but quite rapid is I
Yeah.
find gets
Yeah.
after.
It's not a hard
Yes.
slashing, moving
We're not
water.
we're not peacock bass fishing or fishing for
Yeah.
jacks or something where you
Yeah.
want a big
Exactly.
splash.
You got it.
Yeah.
And
Very
one
cool.
other question I had here is go to river pike flies. I don't know, same for me, but you guys
Same
know
flies. Same flies.
Yeah.
flies.
It doesn't change for me any.
I think what happens
Any
for me
better
is the
size,
fly
right?
size. Well, depending on where you're at, like what is the fish size? What's the target fish? Like is a big fish in that system 30 inches or is a big fish in that system 40 inches? So if it's like the Grand, like a big fish in the Grand is like 30 to 32 inches, like they get bigger, but that's an upper size. You might want to look at like that 4 to 5 inch range of fly, something that every fish can eat. Um, and you're probably going to find more success. But yeah, nothing different with river and lake for flies itself.
Yeah. Not for me either.
Maybe watercolor, like if the river clarity changes due to runoff, you might want something with more vibration, like a Pockerini tail, or pushes a lot of water, and then clear water, something that just kind of glides and slow drops and wanders. Might be something to consider, but
Nice.
pike or pike,
Yeah.
water
Pretty
wolves.
much.
Yeah,
What else we got here? Maybe that's actually a good lead in for you guys. Like this is going to depend on every different body, but maybe think of like some of the more common food items out there. Like how do you think about different forage items and their importance throughout the year? Like,
shoot, one of my
yeah,
yeah, young of the year game fish. Like one of my favorites is like something that's green and white, like a young pike. Like honestly, so many baby pike get eaten by pike. Like it's pretty incredible. There's bait like actual bait fish, like soft rayed fish, like smelts, ciscos, things like that. Then there's game fish. So keep smallmouth in mind, keep walleye in mind, keep crappie and bluegill, all those things in mind. Young pike. Then there's some things people don't think of, like if you want to throw topwaters, think of something more of like small mammals and small birds, things like that. It's on the menu. One of my favorite, topwater baits in conventional is called a top raider, like a tailspin lure, and it's designed to look like a duck trying to swim away, right? Like a baby duck. And the best color is baby loon, black and white speckles. The thing just kills them. So fishing things that like that's kind of the basis is bait fish, game fish. Like they're not benthic feeders unless they're small. Like when they're young of the year, they're feeding on some benthics, but like by the time they're 3 and 2 inches long, which is like not long after hatching, they're already eating other fish, and that's the problem why pike outcompete muskie in so many of our lakes is they hatch earlier than the muskie spawn, and then the muskie get eaten by those young pike. So, yeah, they're just they want to kill, they want to eat and they want to kill, and we've seen some
Mike, are
weird
there
things.
some
I've seen
common kind of windows where you find one food source takes over, like a sucker spawn,
yeah,
like a spawn, or other moments?
yeah,
So I kind of printed out these questions, but that was sort of I had a
maybe
forage by time of year,
leeches.
so I had suckers like sucker run in the
Yeah,
spring.
totally suckers. Yeah.
Weed season. You're starting to think about perch moving into weeds in the
Mm-hmm.
summer. And Matt mentioned it earlier, talking like Cisco and whitefish and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
making their spawning migration in the fall. I'd say those are a couple of the pretty major
I,
ones.
I I also forgot they do eat some benthics. Like in the spring, we all know leeches. They love leeches,
Yeah,
and they do eat crayfish too, depending on your lake. Like on Lake of the Woods, we would fish a lot of like big crankbaits, and when I guided up there and bounce them off rocks for pike, like just make it seem like a crayfish taking off. So they will eat some benthic and creatures as well, but most of the time it's looking to kill. But
yeah.
yeah, that's it. Break it down like your sucker, your panfish, your deep water bait. Like it's something to think about. And panfish, I mean, as game fish, like
And sometimes, and I think you gotta be able to sort of change on the fly because you might have it in your mind. Okay, they're on suckers or something, but then all of a sudden you come around a bay, and sometimes, I'll roll around a bay and there's just a school of bait fish that big that's
yeah,
the size of the boat, and you go,
yeah,
well, okay, I guess that's what they're feeding on. And,
yeah.
and
And that
sometimes you just got to run with it sometimes,
and that's
depending on what you run
it
into.
shows the diversity in your fly box too, right? Like you said, keep
Yeah.
small stuff too. Like it doesn't
Mhm.
have to be always big. Like a small Murdic minnow for me is like absolutely deadly. And it's 4.5 inches long and that catches big fish, right? Like it's all dependent on what they're actively feeding on. So that's an awesome question. And it totally is lake dependent.
Have
Yes.
you ever noticed them feeding much in gobies who are present?
Not yet.
No.
I haven't
Don't
killed
have them
enough
where
to.
I am, thank God.
Yeah.
We got a ton of them, and I'm sure they do. Like everything on Georgian Bay eats gobies. I'm sure if I haven't kept many fish, and if we do keep them, it's usually because they're gill hooked and they're just gonna die, and like we'll take a pike home. But I haven't yet to see a goby in one of their guts, and I think that might have to do with like where pike are living when I'm fishing for them. Like the gobies might still be up
Oh
on the
yeah.
rocks. I'm not quite sure. But I maybe bigger gobies. I don't know. I don't see why not. Like they could. Um, but when I think gobies, I think smallmouth or walleye. Like
It's like the one fish that I haven't heard of it become a thing for. Like even lake
uh,
trout and salmon
oh
and
heck yeah, they're
not
all
salmon,
over
but
them.
steelhead,
Steelhead,
duck
steelhead.
and shallow.
Uh,
Like, like everything's moving
I think
shallower. Like the whole Simcoe whitefish lake trout bite has moved like crazy shallow because of it
yeah.
now. So I just gotta feel like it happens to some extent.
Maybe I should try it this year. Give it a shot.
I mean, what's the difference between that and a leech as well?
I guess my probably that's true. My thing is too. Okay, this actually brings up a kind of a point that came to my mind is because pike aren't the only game fish in my lakes, and when we're pike fishing in the spring, if I'm caught by anybody throwing a 3-inch brown goby, I am going to
Oh
be
yeah.
crucified. I'm going to be crucified. I will be not allowed to be
Yeah.
a guide in Ontario anymore because people will know you're catching smallmouth.
Yeah.
And you catch enough smallmouth on pike flies by mistake. If you get caught, it's like you walk into, oh, you probably catch pike on wacky rig Senkos, but if you go back and throw a wacky rig Senko in a pike bay and someone catches you, even if a CO sees you, he's going to have a lot of questions.
Oh,
You
Oh
know,
yeah.
they're
that's
probably
actually
going
a great point.
Yeah.
they're probably gonna watch you from a distance first. I mean, there's nothing illegal about throwing a Senko for pike, but yeah, I guess
It's
it's another point is if we're in our area, Southern Ontario, and you do find yourself interacting with lots of bass, like just move on a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, like if you find you've caught 3 fish in this one bay and they've all been bass, probably a good idea not only to leave the spawning fish alone, but a good indication that the water temp's too warm. Water temp for smallmouth usually when they're spawning is like 60-ish. So pike like the upper 50s for me. So move out a little bit and you might find them.
Well, that's we used to do it, because that was a common thing where you'd be having pike and bass sort of in the same area and one's open and one isn't.
Exactly.
Um, and if we could, and sometimes we'd just go to sight fishing instead
Yep.
of sort of if you're fan casting the area and you're catching bass off nests or something, we'd either just leave the area or we would not make a cast unless we saw a pike.
Yep.
That was just sort of the way around it.
Yeah.
yeah,
And eventually you're in your areas enough that you kind of know where the bass are spawning and stay out of those spots. So
yeah.
yeah.
We had another question come in. Where do each of you draw the line for fishing depth? So like you can
Great.
fish 30, 40, 50 feet down if you're patient enough on a fly rod. But I think
I'm
you have
not
an
going to.
interesting question on this that kind of ties in there too, Andrew. I don't know if you want to touch on that.
Well, I mean, where I am, I mean, like I said, where I am, I mean, it's 10 feet and less pretty much all season.
Your question about fishing bowls or deeper.
Oh yeah, well yeah. Okay, so like yeah, yeah. So that was one of my questions. If you guys had sort of gotten into like in the fall, and we were talking about that Cisco spawn,
Mm-hmm.
sinking lines and getting into point. That was sort of one of my fall things. Is if you looked at a map and you're talking about identifying areas on a map. So in the fall, I would look at a lake and look at the main basin.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the deepest point of water, and I'd be looking for every big major point that touched on that. It's
Yep.
sort of one of those things I would work in the fall, and sometimes
Okay.
I'd be out over 50 feet. I might be fishing 20 feet down or 10 feet down over 50 feet of water, but catching fish. Not a lot of them, but big ones.
Big fish. Yeah, that's
Big
big
fish,
fish
yeah.
technique. So I draw a line. Yeah, I even conventional where I can get down deep. I don't fish deeper than 30 feet. Like, you got one atmospheric pressure at roughly 30 feet.
Yeah.
Fish like bass and pike and walleye, they can't burp gases out of their swim bladder. And there's techniques to what they call fizz fish and like let air out of their swim bladder to let them swim back down, and mixed reviews on how successful it is. There's actually some really cool video out there right now of catching crappie through the ice in over 30 feet of water and releasing them immediately and watching them still under their own pressure and strength get back down to bottom, and watching them on live scope and not seeing them float back up. So like deemed a success. But then there's also research, depending on how much handling time those fish just die and expire. They can't swim down. So with fish like pike, like they do pull, you're not going to be able to pull one in like you can a 1 pound crappie, like just reefing it up off the bottom. With pike, you're going to fight them, and you're probably going to fight them to exhaustion. Like a big pike, I don't know about you, but like they always require boat side handling. Like you're going to hold them by the tail. You're going to make sure they're upright, breathing. You're not pulling them back and forth. You're just holding them still, letting them pump water through their gills and swim away. But once you're getting into that 30-foot range, like they're not able to burp those gases, and you're just going to kill fish. And that comes from, like, even I've seen it with muskie, sad enough. Like there's such a limited resource. Like you're fishing deeper than that with jigging baits or deep diving crankbaits. Fish do, and fish do die. I find like we're always tiptoeing around that as anglers, but like fish, but you want to, if you're playing it as a catch and release game, there's things you can do to stack the odds in your favor of a successful release. Is like gear that's appropriate to the size of the fish so you can land them quick. Barbless hooks if you're looking to always release them. And pike give you lots of shots. Muskie, I fish barbed because you might only get one shot. I want to get that fish in the boat. But pike, it's almost always barbless. And then you can control water depth. And if you're marking fish down on the bottom, maybe like Andrew said, find those points that are real close, because I bet you those fish that are on the bottom in 50 feet, some of them are going to be up in 25. And that seems to be okay. But if you're keeping fish, if you want to keep your limit and you're catching hammer handles, like then I guess there is no depth, but what's reasonable on a fly rod? Like I'm not going to wait to get down 50 feet. Like it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, and like the other thing at that, like I can't honestly say that I have experimented at that kind of depth. Like I don't know, deep side fish pike is like maybe getting close to 20, but
yeah, I'm the same.
But like when they get to those kind of depths, a lot of the time they get on those kind of, deeper water baits too, like whitefish, Cisco, which are just like out in the open, not always related structurally. They become kind of pelagic in my mind.
Yeah, of course.
I feel like it's, I like I said, I haven't put in the time, so maybe I'm making this up. It just feels like it's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's needle in a haystack sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And you're almost thinking of schools of bait fish out in the middle, that's your structure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that could be
that's
just
how you got treated.
Stay on top of with a fly, like you can mark them, then staying on top of that bait with a fly when it needs to sink for a minute. That's
where live scope comes in.
But like the point you probably add to that is like if one fishery that you fish, the fish are that deep, you might be able to find another one where they're shallow, where the water temp profile is just
like nearby or attached or something like that.
Yeah, like I think of a place like I don't know. I mean, yeah, Georgian Bay, they probably end up like kind of middle of the lake, or not middle, but like way out toward the outer islands a lot of the time. Real big fish. But then, you take a lake like some of those big Muskoka lakes, like you say, that like real deep edges and stuff, fish under trees and stuff, and the temps aren't so bad, even a little later into the year. Like you might be able to find different places that way.
For sure.
Yeah.
But you can, but it can, but touching some of those points that touch the main basin, you hit it on the right day. And,
look for. And going back to you, like it was your question for us, but you seem to be the expert on that.
Well, no, I mean it was just because it's something I don't really get to do anymore. And it's really something. It's been a decade. But it was something fun that I enjoyed. That was big. Yeah. It was a big fish thing.
We catch a lot of them doing that when we're actually targeting muskie. In early fall, you're out chasing big muskie is usually time of year for us, and they're going to be in those spots, and you do catch. You get very disappointed when it's a 40-inch pike.
I know, yeah.
Ever be disappointed when it's a 40-inch pike, but those times do call for it. Heck, I mean, even when I'm done limited, I've done it not often, but for fun, sometimes where I live, like we'll run out, me and my family, and we'll just go downrig and troll for lake trout. Like there's so many stocked lake trout in my area, and it's fun, like action. And we've caught pike in 100 feet of water, right? Like they're dead. They come up, they're completely dead, but like they will live in deep water. There's wherever they're comfortable. Cool. What's next?
What haven't we touched on? We covered a lot of ground here.
I know, it's awesome. I want to thank everybody for their questions, because it's been like awesome. I didn't think we'd get this many.
Oh, there's one that we've got to go over though. It's one of yours,
Sure.
Matt, with the predicting lakes.
Yeah, I was exactly what I was just gonna ask. So like, between the two of you guys, and I have maybe some tips here as well, but if you're looking at map and Ontario, how I don't even know what the actual number of lakes is in Ontario, but like how would you go about predicting which lakes hold pike for one, and which pike lakes hold numbers versus which lakes hold big fish? Because it's usually not the same.
Yeah.
Down here,
Agreed.
anyways, down here.
Yeah, I mean, I can start off, I guess, and like because I'll have the least informed opinion here. But like I mean, first off, like the easiest no-brainer thing to be fish online. Like if people aren't familiar with that,
Totally.
may not work
Yeah.
always like way up north, but
Fish
like
brain.
anything cottage country up towards Sudbury and really beyond, like
Oh
just
yeah, it just gets
look
better.
up fish online. It's an atlas done by the ministry of like all the lakes and documented fish in them, and you just search for pike for one. So that's a good starting point. But I mean, obviously, these fish do have certain requirements, and at the end of the day, there aren't many waters short of like crazy cold, super glacial, sterile waters that couldn't hold these things in my mind. Like so
Right,
long
some of those
as
lakes,
sorry,
some of those lakes hold the biggest fish.
and then some do. Like if they're
Yeah, it's crazy.
them, but like pike are kind of cool that way because you have like these super mucky, shallow, hot lakes in the summer down here that some of them have pike. They're usually dinky hammer handles, but they do have them.
Well, that's
And
it, right? That's a good.
huge lake trout lakes like Simcoe or the Great Lakes, and they all have awesome pike too. So it's weird because there's almost no water temp around here they can't sustain it, it seems, as long as there's some forage to support them and that. But sorry, go ahead.
Do you think water temperature could potentially, like, those peak water temperatures in the summer and lake size can stunt fish size?
I think they do. So that was my next point. In terms of the size, I've never seen real hot mucky lakes produce size.
No, lots of numbers, lots of numbers.
And like the glacial, super cold lakes, sometimes they're really slow growing. But to your point, they can support size because pike are cold water fish. I mean, look at like the Bering Sea pike that they get. Like,
Oh, yeah.
Not Bering Sea. The
No,
Baltic?
Baltic.
The Baltic.
Baltic. Bering's a little too big.
Well, it's also saltwater.
Yeah.
Although they can do brackish water, so kind of interesting.
Baltic, but yeah, like obviously.
But I think that's a big. If you're talking, I think Chris is right on point. Do your research, talk to people, go online. But if you're talking, there is a difference between numbers lakes and size lakes, and some places have both.
Yeah,
but if I was thinking of if I want size, I probably want a lake that has lake trout in it, or Cisco, or some sort of deep water fish. Just because that tells me that is a lake that is going to be deep enough so that in the middle of summer, that those fish that want that cold temperature, they can slide off. When you're talking about that you'll catch a pike in 100 feet of water randomly for a lake trout, but that's sort of what you need to produce those really big pike, or just a big body of water.
Yeah, you got it. Room to spread out.
How do you guys think about? And maybe this ties into the numbers aspect about the spawning options for these fish and how that options
like how many bays they have access to, or like
how quality the spawning grounds are.
Well, they're group spawners, right? So like one female will have like 4 or 5 males on her. So they're not afraid to be near each other during the spawn. Doesn't mean they like it. If you've done any spring pike fishing after opener, you will see what I mean. There are lots of bite marks on fish. And often that's a good indicator that if you see a bite mark that's 8 inches wide, you're in the right zone. Like you're somewhere where there's a big fish on a 20-inch hammer handle. But like anything, whether it's like an aquarium or a backyard pond or a lake, I think if there's more spawning water, right, there's less competition for that spawning water, which allows the young of the year to grow larger, quicker, or maybe spread out so they're not all getting compacted by like predatory fish or birds, herons, things like that. I don't think you can go wrong with a bigger lake. right? Like bigger the lake, probably bigger fish, more forage, more food, more room to move around. Like Andrew said, find that deeper water. Um, that's probably a good place to start if
Yeah.
you're looking for big fish.
And
Cool thing about bigger lakes.
I would say, and big pike thrive on neglect,
Oh
low
yeah,
pressure. I mean, sometimes just I would say even when I'm guiding, I mean, we see a lot of pressure, but there are times towards the end of the season where sometimes success requires just finding fish that other people haven't.
yeah.
And sometimes that can account
I
for
like
a
that.
lot too. It's
I
just
like that.
yeah, it's because you get into the habit, you go to these same spots, and we all fish these same areas. I mean, it's not a secret, but sometimes it's your best days are just exploring and getting away from your milk run.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of going A, B, C and doing all that, and you force yourself, and you're gonna have failures. You're gonna fish spots that don't produce, but sometimes you'll fish a spot and go, oh, hey, maybe next spring this would be good, but
Mm,
yeah, getting away from the crowd or getting lower
yeah.
pressure waters can account for a lot too.
I try to do one of those spots a day at least. And I used to try to hide it from my guests and be like, oh yeah, like this is a great bay. Like, but I'm
Yeah,
now open, like, hey, look, I've never fished this. Let's give
yeah,
it 15 minutes. Let's see what's here. And sometimes they're like, we feel like a sense of like communal success. It's like, holy crap,
yeah.
this is so cool. Like, there's a fish here. Like, no way. That's always a cool feeling. I love that because then you just have a new spot. Like my my
It,
my maps, the GPS pins is just kind of ridiculous at this point.
yeah.
From every day of just throwing one or two spots I've never fished. That can go for any fishery, any fish. But
That's something that I try to do. I still try to do, and it gets hard after a while. But yeah,
yeah,
I just try and every day I just try and fish something, and sometimes it's random. But all of a sudden you pull
yeah,
up on a random. It's like, oh, there's a weed bed here.
yeah.
Those are the
Don't
ones
always
I
fish
like
your
finding. It's random
yeah,
weed bed that
surprise weed
nobody knew
beds.
about,
Yeah,
and all of a sudden, hey, that's your weed
yeah,
bed now.
yeah.
But guests
Don't
love that. And,
they
it
do?
is funny when you say, "Hey, I've never fished this spot. Let's try it." Guests get pretty excited about it. They go, "Hey, you're the first two."
yeah,
I like it. So here's a follow up then. So as far as forage, obviously that matters the size of fish, right? Bigger forage available, bigger body
big
of water, like
fish.
the aquarium
Yeah,
example.
or
Bigger
vol or
fish.
volume. Yeah.
So here's another coming at the opposite end of the food chain. Pike are bad for muskie when they get into a
Uh-huh.
lake where there isn't some kind of balance already struck. Like when the fourth is, you have a lake that pike get in, pike spawn earlier, they eat muskie young of the year. It's generally not a good thing for muskie. What about the other way around? Do you find that muskie have any effect in the quality of pike fishery?
No, I feel like they just occupy different. I think they occupy different niches
Yeah.
in the summer. Like a muskie has no problem living in 75-degree water up shallow under a dock, and a pike's like no, and that's why they're successful. Like if there's enough room for them to spread out. But the problem with like the lakes in the Kawarthas is these are small lakes. Like
And the
they're
pike
not.
have to stay shallow because there's no deep.
There's no deep water, right? And those pike are stunted. Like finding a 30 to 34 incher in some of those Kawartha lakes is a big fish, right? Like that's a. But the muskie can get 47 to 50. It's kind of funny, right? It's almost like the
Well,
fish
prime versus
probably get heat stress, right? In the summer, they probably go dormant in heat stress, just like go out and don't grow, just like shut down. I bet it's something like that. I'm not a scientist, but like I feel like there's something relatable there to water temp and fish growth. But if a lake's big enough, like Georgian Bay is huge, like we're over 1 million acres, and those fish can spread out, and the muskie and pike relatively get along. It's
makes sense.
everybody. The further north you get, people hate pike for different reasons. They hate pike for eating all the walleye. The
Even
famous
though they're both
reason.
native. Yeah.
Yeah,
But think about in Canada, like think of the lakes that have produced the biggest muskie in the world. All those
all
lakes
pike.
have pike in them.
Yeah, St. Lawrence,
So
Georgian
there's a balance.
Bay,
Yeah, the St. Lawrence. They're
There's a
all
balance. Yeah.
the ones
Lake of
that
the
produce
Woods.
probably
But
the
they're all
biggest
deep
pike and
water.
the biggest muskie is the ones where they cohabitate, unless you're getting way up beyond the muskie range.
Where they
But
stop. And the
Matt makes
muskie
the
ranges.
point. The one common factor is all those lakes are deep. So they
Yeah,
have deep water
that's
for
a
the
pretty
pike
big
to
one.
buzz off too,
Uh,
right?
Mhm.
Like yeah, St. Lawrence, St. Clair's not that deep, but it's big enough. Like the
But
world.
like the pike fishing in St. Clair, I mean, from my experience, I haven't seen it as good as the muskie fishing.
I
Like the
would agree.
muskie dominate that lake. Like
Yeah,
that's one lake you can go muskie fishing in, and maybe not guarantee a fish a day, but it's pretty dang close. Like I've heard of guys out there trolling
I've
and getting 10, 15 fish. Like that's a muskie day. It's like,
it's
I've
it's
had
it's it's muskie catching.
it
yeah,
really is.
exactly.
It
Yeah,
Yeah,
is.
like
I've
up
had like six,
here,
seven fish days out there hooks.
that's
It's
Yeah,
incredible. like even Lake of the Woods, which people will might title it one of the top lakes in the world, where I guided for them. Like a fish a day is fantastic.
Yeah.
All right, Lake St. Clair is just loaded with fish. It's crazy. I've caught pike there, but never to the same caliber of numbers or size.
It's funny.
Muskie seem to be that battle.
So for me and so actually, me in Southern Ontario, the lake where I grew up catching big pike, the muskie fishing was all right. I never caught a giant. But then the body of water that I fish that has the most big muskie, I'm talking like, mid 50 inches, 40 pounders.
Mm-hmm.
We've caught the odd 40-inch pike out of that water. And yeah, so I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe there's
that's
something.
how I feel. That's how I feel, honestly, about where I guide on Georgian Bay. Like we don't see a ton of 40-inch pike. Like we see a lot of
Yeah.
30 to 35 inchers. But the muskie you see there, you don't see 35-inch muskie. Like you're gonna
Yeah.
see a couple. If you see one a day, that's huge success. But they're all like 48 to 54. Like they're giants.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's an interesting
I
point.
think
I
it's not a
wonder.
factor, like not to confuse correlation and causation. I feel like it's not them out competing each other in those cases. I feel like it's usually a case of the water is just more prime for the one
For
species
one,
than the other.
Yeah.
But to
yeah.
your point, Georgian Bay is weird because it should be a bigger pike fishery. I mean,
Now, depending where you are in Georgian Bay,
yeah,
right? Like
it could
where
be.
I'm in Severn Sound range, like we will go up to like the Perry Sound kind of area, and the further north they get closer to Perry Sound, the fish get bigger.
That
But it's a
kind of
heck of a
makes
run.
It
But when
kind
you
of
get up
makes
to
sense because it's
Manitoulin,
shallower on average in the second.
it is.
Well, you
Severn
got
is
past
shallower. I
the
mean,
island, but like
there's
in
there's
the
60 there's
island,
60 feet. Yeah.
yeah, I mean it's
It
true. It's in there. Yeah, it's a weird one.
like, but I think it's almost. I think of Severn Sound as a lot of not as a nursery by any means, because we find big fish and they spawn in there and whatever. But it almost seems like it's a natural transition of like another big river system, like I mentioned earlier, right? Like it's moving away from that. Like the bigger they get, they go out offshore, off of Beausoleil, things like that, and they suspend and they do feed on whitefish and they do feed on ciscos, and it's
Maybe
the
we're just
exact
not.
same thing the muskie do. And like that's how we fish muskie in the fall. We troll big crankbaits in like 50 to 70 feet of water, 20 feet down, and you do
Yeah.
catch pike doing that, right? Like you're looking for bait, you're trolling around bait balls, doing circles like a dummy, but you find a bait ball, and you're just going to go around that a bunch of times, right? Um, yeah, there's just it's interesting. You get up to Manitoulin and the fish get huge.
But very
So
different water, like
very
clear, older,
clear.
deeper, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of unique. It's almost like lakes within lakes. It's so big, right? Like there's eutrophic sections of Georgian Bay, then there's oligotrophic sections of Georgian Bay. Like it's massive.
That
Yeah.
that's similar to where I got. I could go down to one section and it's clear and rocky, and then you go up to another one. There's spots I could run a kilometer and go from the clearest water you want to the murkiest water you want, and
Right.
it just fish is different.
Sure. Makes sense. It's so cool.
One more question here. I feel like we're gonna wrap kind of soon, but I don't know if
Mhm.
there's other questions going to go. But from Keith, jumping around topic a bit, but wondering what line to get for the first pipeline. Thinking intermediate, but looking for
Yeah. My most used line is either a type 3 or an intermediate, depending on the time of year. Intermediate in the spring, first few weeks, and then I could do like a type 3 because I like buoyant flies, and that gets the fly down a foot or two. I'm not using it to get the fly down, 3 or 4 feet, because the fly does float, or even a Buford, like it's gonna suspend. It's gonna get it down a foot or two. Like it's not going super deep. So if I had to pick
I would
one,
add, it might.
I'd pick a type 3. Type 3, my most
Yeah,
useful one.
I might add that might depend a little on casting distance as well. Like if you're
Sure.
fishing a river where it's like close range, it's not much harm in going a little bit heavier, I feel like, right? Like
Mhm.
the type 3 is not really going to get down. But if you're
No,
like,
but a 5.
oh yeah, for sure. But
Uh,
like you're not going to be in trouble if you try to fish slow. Whereas if
no,
you're like laying
no.
out longer casts in places, if
But
it's
cool thing with that is the SA. I probably got one. The Titans, right? They're all like the Sonar Titans. Like they're varied sink rates, right? So like even on a far cast, it's just the tip that might be getting down. It's not making a big belly in your line.
I think they're maybe
It's very
sinking a little.
direct.
It's not like a tip line where it's maxing out. I think they do.
No, it's not an angle, but it does kind of level hover down. Like it's a nice presentation all the way to the boat. There's
I
not
think
the
I
same
go
like
yeah,
vertical.
myself. But yeah. But yeah, 3 if you're retrieving a lot more. You, Andrew? Floating?
I mean, I really up where I am because I don't use a sink. We don't use sink lines. I mean, I'll
Yeah,
run
Crazy.
sink lines if we're going for Lakers and stuff, but in the pike fishing and my guiding, it's floating and intermediate, and even then, it's probably floating,
That's
80%
awesome.
of the time.
Very cool.
But that's my location,
Mm-hmm.
But if I was looking to get a fly, if I was more thinking I'm gonna do most of my pike fishing in the spring on southern Ontario, I'd probably go floating or intermediate maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I'm with you there. I think that's the one. I think we actually missed a question a while back. Somebody was asking about what's the most versatile line for wading for pike? Any different?
Probably floating.
Yeah,
Probably floating.
I'd go
I feel like you'd get in the least trouble with that.
Yeah, you're not going to be in the weeds.
Yeah.
I'd go floating.
Yeah, I think I'd go intermediate tip myself.
Okay.
Something to get you down. But those tip lines are great because, like, if the whole back thing's flowing as you're retrieving the line, you're not using a basket. It's not sinking at your feet, but it can still get you in just a little.
Yeah, like the floating intermediate version.
Yeah.
That's the FI. That's an awesome line.
Can you have a fly shop over there, Matt?
I got a lot of stuff. It's all brand new too. This hasn't even opened yet.
Yeah. And the same goes for trout, like fun bank fishing trout. It's the same kind of idea a lot of the times. Depends on the situation, but like if you're in a typical area where it's like shallow for a ways and that kind of drops, simple.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's do a quick rapid fire. One question from each of us.
Okay, who starts?
You.
Okay. What water temp do you see fish transition out of the bays?
Oh, it's where I am. I mean, I'm always looking for 62.
Yeah. I was gonna say 63 for me. That's so interesting. Wow.
I would have been much rougher and said, high 50s, 60.
Yeah.
You guys have
63 seems to be this number where they're now like they're not in there.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. It just goes to sell pike or pike.
Well, no, but yeah, but like 62. Like if I got 62, like I'm like, okay, good. Yeah,
that's
I start getting up above that, and you go,
That's where I like 63 to 65. I'm starting to think they're a little deeper.
That's awesome.
I'm the same with you.
All right, you, Andrew?
Okay. Let's see. What have I got left here? Oh, what are your general thoughts on flash in your flies?
Oh, great question. I like it.
I know you go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I think this is subjective because I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, and I think it's all situational. But I don't know.
It is.
Flash it's a big topic, I think.
I like it in searching patterns. I'm not so big on it on sight fishing patterns.
That's exactly where I'm at.
100%.
Yeah.
But one exception is the whistler I tie in black has black flashaboo in its tail. So like it's black. It's got a little bit of flash, but it's black.
Yeah, I'm with both. Yeah, and again, I default back to I just brought these props out because they're fun. But, like I looked at all these old school lures, the little shad rat. Like they're not actually shiny. Like this one's bright, whatever.
Right.
But like these aren't actually all that reflective. Like short of going to monstrous blade bait. I think that's your reactive bait again. The only one that is for me is on Lake Ontario, where they're all on like I find silver-sided bait fish, like they're on alewife or they're on smelts or something. The silver can be really good for a little twitchy, even if you're just suspending it. Kind of like it, but yeah, I'm generally with you. Drive if it's slow, a little flashy if it's fast.
I agree. That was sort of my same. Yeah, the more aggressive I want to be, the more search oriented. Yeah, the more flash I might incorporate.
Yeah.
And with flash, keep in mind with like the head run stuff, there's so many different types of flash. Like some of it is very stiff, some of it's very stiff and hardly flashy at all, and others is like the holographic flash, which is like light going everywhere, and then the traditional flash view, which is like marabou. It's so soft. It's just like it adds life without adding flash. So it's like it's interesting to play with. Like there's some really good videos from a tire, Nicholas Bauer, where he talks about like incorporating different types of flash into your fly to not only build profile, but to like, maybe create a flashy, but a subtly flashy fly. versus like a
Yeah.
bright, flashy
Like,
fly.
like I look at what I've got on my bench, and these are probably the two flashes I tie. I use like the Flashaboo, the wide stuff,
Yeah,
and
yeah, the
Crystal
Magnum.
Flash.
Okay,
And
yeah,
those are the two, pretty much whatever I'm tying is going to incorporate.
yeah.
Those will be my flashes.
Here, here's a little difference with the three that I use. So they got so that's like the tinsel holographic flash. We can see how sparkly that stuff
Yeah.
is, right? Like it's like disco ball. To then like the traditional Flashaboo, which is just very soft, subtle. But
Mhm.
then you get the Magnum Predator Flashaboo, which is just like got a good mix of like bright, but then also just pearl. Like it's like, and it's stiff and it's wide and it'll build up a fly. And when that's just tied into a fly, honestly, just like that, it's not that flashy. Like it's almost translucent in a way. Like it's got that pearly translucence material, which is pretty cool. Um,
Yeah.
that's a good hack too if you're tying with this stuff. Like just pull your zip tie all the way to the top, and you get so much length to work with. Um,
That's how I do a lot of them. Yeah.
yeah,
But it's
if you
funny, like,
can, because
but with like the bunny leechers, there was somebody, one of your reps, Chris, did a bunny leech here recently.
That
yep,
was Matt.
that was
Oh,
was
no,
me.
no, that was Joven. Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
Joven, right? The white and
yeah.
yellow one.
He tied a chartreuse and white
Yeah,
bunny leech, and I watched and I thought, oh, it's great, but it was interesting because he put flash in it.
Yeah.
yeah.
And I
But I
generally never
don't.
put flash on my bunny leech, but I thought, you know what? But with the white and chartreuse, I thought that makes
Uh,
sense. That sort of
yeah,
bait fishy, and I thought,
yeah,
okay, that makes sense. But if I tie a black bunny leech, I wouldn't put flash in it.
yeah.
It's
No
just
flash on mine.
yeah.
Although I
But if
do sometimes play with like not lead eyes, but weighted eyes sometimes. I don't know if you do that at all, but
there was some, I thought that was something interesting. That
like
was
it's like they're brass eyes, like they're not
yeah,
super heavy, but it keeps the hook point up. So when I'm bouncing it on the bottom, I'm not. There's a very vivid memory I have from this fall of one pike that was like tailing someone's bunny leech, and I was using a whistler actually, so hook point down, and like the fish wanted it, and it was the only stick in the bay the hook found, and it was like the fish was pulling at the hackles, like trying to pull it off, and it was
yeah.
just like I might have dropped 20 F bombs if you're watching this, if people know who I was talking about. It's on video.
But
But
that's I thought that was something I actually want to ask you a little bit about because like I don't ever add weight to a bunny leech. Like
okay.
I like it for the slow when I think
Mm-hmm.
finesse because I want it hovering.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I thought it was interesting that you're adding weight and you are fishing it
Not all
almost
of
like
them. Yeah, not all of them. Like I have 50-50, so
yeah,
like it's
yeah.
like play with them. But there are some situations, like my guest Richard, who caught the biggest pike this past year with me. He caught it on like a slightly weighted version,
Mhm.
and the reason that fish ate it, we had like 4 or 5 fly swaps. That fish would fall to the boat and then slink off. We throw another fly at
Yeah,
it. Like change your flies up after one rejects it, change it, try to change it,
absolutely,
throw
yeah.
something else at it. And it ate the minute that slightly weighted fly hit bottom and created some dust. So then I started tying them with a bit more weight so that it creates more dust with less time. So it like gets down to the bottom a little quicker, not fast. Like this thing sinks at maybe 6 inches a second. Like it's not fast
Yeah, yeah,
sinking,
yeah.
but it's enough in 4 feet of water. I can count 5 or 6 and it's on bottom. And when I lift it with a floating line, it's like poof, little dust cloud, little
Yeah.
dust cloud. And for some reason, I've been able to repeat that with the dust cloud
Yeah.
kind of mentality, like almost like the tarpon bump. It's a 1 inch or a half-inch strip, like it's a bump, 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 and let that thing just create some dust. And it can sometimes drive those fish a little bit crazy. Like they just want
Are
to
you
inhale it.
in your sight these are sight fishing
Sight
situations?
sight fish, yeah,
Yeah,
sight
yeah.
fish. I don't fish a bunny leech unless I see them. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I'm pretty much the same, yeah.
I
No,
mean,
and I've
there's
had success with conventional jig where I've sight fished them with jig, guys that aren't
yeah,
fly fishing, and they
yeah,
come, and it's amazing when you see that and you see that fish tilt.
yeah, yeah. Oh God, here it
It's
comes.
amazing how they do. You think of fish, pike always sort of sitting on bottom, or doing
Yeah,
this in the column, but when they want to eat something off bottom, that whole thing just rises up, and you just see that
yeah.
mouth just go.
That's it. Gone. You better set.
I think you've been fishing a goby this whole time, Matt.
I
Yeah,
might have been. Yeah. Yeah, that's funny.
This
Um,
has been great.
well,
It's really
that's
fun.
super
yeah,
fun. Like, thanks
absolutely.
for. I'm glad so many questions came through that weren't ours. I thought we were just gonna be asking our own questions all night. That'd be awesome.
Hopefully,
Yeah.
somebody learned something out there. I learned
Yeah,
something.
I learned a ton.
Same. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was just awesome.
it's
It's
always.
cool to get like the two of you in the same room at the same time. It's usually it's
Mhm.
just getting your thoughts, but to have like slightly different viewpoints coming in is a cool way to do it. So,
But on a lot of this, we were pretty point on a lot of these things. He likes, he's talking 63-degree water. I'm talking 62. But hey, let's not split hairs here.
yeah,
it's
no,
just
but
amazing to
just
see
having
how
different perspectives, like how we like a lot of that was sort of an echo chamber of the same stuff, but it was from different perspectives. Like, yeah, that works in this lake, but if you get to these lakes where I fish, it may be different.
Yeah. But what's cool about that is like I think it is a bit of an echo chamber, but it does show how pike or pike, like we don't need to always overthink them. They're gonna want to be defined as the warmest water in the coldest lakes in the spring. So most of the time down here we're fishing spring pike. Find that warm water. You're gonna find 80% of the population. Like they're gonna be there. I can look at a map without ever knowing like a depth chart, just a Google image, and probably give you 10 spots, and 8 of those 10 have pike in them. Right. Without knowing the depths, I just know I can see weed growth and I can see a river coming in, whatever it is. And it's not saying it's like, oh, I know it all. It's more like they're pretty obvious, when you just do your homework, utilize Google Earth for your research, and then go out there, and time on the water is the number one thing down here. We have pressure on our lakes, so much pressure on the lakes down here that we need to try to fish weekdays, less boat traffic, especially after May 2-4 weekend. Those fish can get put down. Like I've seen those fish just stop on the Muskoka lakes, and they're just done. Like you're not getting them. So try to fish midweek if you can, or early and late. Like I think you mentioned that too, Andrew. Afternoon bite can be so good. Yeah.
Cool. Off hours, yeah. For sure.
Sweet. You guys, if anyone wants to follow up with you, Andrew, you are pikeonthefly.ca?
Pikeonthefly.com. Yeah, got the little website. We got a few little articles and stuff up there. Just growing it bit by bit. But
yeah, some really good intel up there if anyone wants to follow up there. And then Matt, Smooth River Guiding.
Smoothriver.ca. Smoothriver.ca, Instagram, whatever. I'm always available.
On the world
especially this time of year. Yep. Especially this time of year, I'm trying to book trips.
Very well booked up for Pike. So
I wouldn't say I'm booked up. Like I think May's got 3 dates left. Early June in Muskoka, we're still getting them. I've got a handful of days in early June left, but like early to mid, like talking like June 15th, June 20th. At that point, I'm kind of like, let's go to trout and before bass opens. Also, though, keep in mind the relatively, it's not new, but it's relatively new, is the full year season in the Kawarthas. And I do guide that, and that starts at ice out. So, it could start once I get my boat back from, I'm getting it overhauled this year, all new interior. Once that's back in my driveway, I'm going to be starting. So that'll probably be like early. I know, like early. I'm probably aiming for early April is probably when I'm thinking I'll be out there again. So it's great because otherwise it's just steelhead. Really, it's open. So you got to panfish.
Those are actually some of the nicer days that I've had on lakes.
Oh my!
Just at ice out when it's like calm and sunny and like
it's so nice. No bugs. Yeah, no mosquitoes, no horseflies killing you. Awesome. So April days, I'm still pretty open. Hit me up. Cool.
Reminder for everyone as well, we still have a fly tying sale going on in shop, 20% off.
Oh yeah.
You need to gear up till Sunday. In the meantime,
coming
up. I have 4 coming up. We'll see everyone there. And thanks for joining us. It's fun.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Matt, thank you.
Good to see you guys.
Awesome.
Pleasure.
All right, guys. Have
as
a good
always.
night.
Take care, guys.
Take care. Bye. Still streaming?